The bill before this Honorable House is the Motor Car Ride Sharing Amendment Act 2026, which provides for the introduction and operation of a ride-sharing service to augment the public transportation system, to improve accessibility to all locations, and to reduce passenger wait times. Mr. Speaker, one of the 2022 Throne Speech initiatives was the modernization and harmonization of the public service vehicle industry, as the #1 complaint of visitors to Bermuda is the inability for our transport system to effectively move people around the island. Mr. Speaker, ride-sharing refers to a transportation service where individuals approved to provide ride-sharing services used approved private vehicles to provide rides to others in exchange for cashless payment. Mr. Speaker, ride-sharing service will fall under the oversight of the Public Service Vehicle Licensing Board. The board's enhanced responsibilities will include areas such as the determination of applications for ride-sharing permits and the granting of ride-share permits. The board may also refuse to grant a ride-share permit where the applicant does not meet all of the necessary requirements. The board will also have the power to suspend or revoke a ride-sharing permit where the ride-sharing permit holder or operator breaches the law. Mr. Speaker, those approved to participate as ride-sharing permit holders and ride-sharing operators will be governed by new regulations and existing regulations related to public service vehicles. This involves using a mobile app with an approved dispatch service that will connect passengers with ride-share operators. This means there will be no hailing from the street or hires from a rank lined up at various locations, as is the case for the taxi industry. Mr. Speaker, safety is of paramount importance. Therefore, those applying for the ride-share permits will be subject to a criminal record check and a traffic offense record check. In addition, Mr. Speaker, those who pass both checks will be required to have their private vehicles go through an enhanced inspection by the Transport Control Department. Once the vehicle passes the inspection, the individual must evidence that they have purchased motor vehicle insurance that includes ride-sharing. Mr. Speaker, a person granted a ride-sharing permit and an approved ride-sharing operator must register with all approved dispatching services. Registration will be free of charge because the dispatch service will be required to adopt a fee-per-ride model. Under this structure, the dispatching service earns a fixed fee for a ride-sharing service. This model ensures dispatching companies are compensated proportionally to the volume of rides facilitated, thereby promoting a model that avoids annual or quarterly membership fees in favor of the dispatching service, resulting in more flexibility and equitability. This approach not only mitigates financial barriers to entry, but also incentivizes dispatching companies to enhance their service offerings and infrastructure to attract and retain clients. The fee-per-ride model will be incorporated into every ride, becoming a component for the total cost borne by the passenger. Mr. Speaker, this new transportation service option is one that has passenger safety as one of its underlying principles. Therefore, any person who provides ride-sharing service without adhering to the legislation commits an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine not exceeding $10,000. Mr. Speaker, to provide clarity and transparency regarding the financial aspects of operating a ride-share business, a ride-sharing permit will cost $1,000 per vehicle per annum, and the payroll tax obligation to permit holders will be $400 per annum. There will be no additional license fee obligation for ride sharing. Mr. Speaker, the ministry remains committed to protecting taxi owners' livelihood. Mr. Speaker, the ministry remains committed to protecting taxi operators' livelihood, and the new transportation service provides locals and visitors with another option should no taxis be available when needed. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to present this bill, which is evidence of the government's ongoing commitment to modernizing transportation for locals and to ensure that there are more public service vehicles available to effectively transport people around the island. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Does any other member wish to make a contribution at this time? MP Robinson, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, and good evening to the listening audience and good evening to the colleagues. I will make sure that my comments hold the weight of what we are discussing here, and that is people's livelihoods and the ability to make a living in Bermuda. So I will not say anything lightly, as that is a huge weight for anyone who is in a leadership position. But this is a mix of livelihood and convenience. And as leaders, we have to consider that as a lawyer, some lawyers will be able to, most lawyers will be able to represent one side of this. And in this chamber, we represent both the taxi operators, the minibus drivers, and the customers that utilize it. And so logically, just making high-level comments here, logically, in my mind, the minister had two choices with this. The first choice would be to have leaned in to enforce and ensure that the regulation of our current industry was up to par and tried to work from there. Or the second option would be to have just allowed rideshare to come in and let the industry take its natural course. As we know, in smaller jurisdictions, rideshare usually, or any Uber-esque app, usually leads to the decimation of the taxi industry. But what we've gotten in this legislation is a fusion of both, which will please nobody. In this case, you have the priority being taxi drivers, which we support, but we also have, I am, yes, absolutely, Minister. In case you didn't, hey, thank you, Premier, appreciate it. Can't wait for your time to weigh in. Here we have a fusion where, yes, taxi drivers have priority, but also the rideshare drivers are restricted to certain times and only on a catch-all basis. So presenting it to the public as another option is a technicality. It is more so still the same system of having to go through a dispatch and go for a taxi, and when the taxi cannot pick you up, that is when you have an option for rideshare. It is not an option where you can go straight to the rideshare. So I think that in that case, it presents a no, let me finish. I'm getting there. What I'm talking about here is the fact that it has been presented to the public as this Uber-esque service where they will be able to bypass or to get around taxi drivers. And but that is what the public perception is. That is what the public perception is. But I'll speak to you, Mr. Speaker, but that's what the public's perception is. So we know that the compensation, that option there hasn't been explored because there's been no talk about how taxi drivers will be compensated or anyone who is now utilizing a $100,000 permit with that option of rideshare and Uber being brought in. So we now know that we're getting a fusion of these two things where folks are going to be disappointed on both ends. Let me see. So there were potential ways in which, and we've long supported the enforcement and the proper regulation of the current industry. So we don't, as a party, have issues with rideshare as a concept. What we have issues with is the unintended consequences that this potential legislation will bring when utilized in a way that seems to hamstring both sides of the fence. So if it was an issue with the amount of people who are getting lifts, or that there was an issue with volume, then why not temporary taxi permits? Like, why hasn't the government shown the public that it was willing to work with the taxi industry first to fill a lot of these gaps? There hasn't been a case made for how
Point of information, Mr. Speaker.
Do you wish to take your point of information?
The honorable member from the other side has made a comment that why hasn't the government shown the taxi industry that we are willing to work with them? Mr. Speaker, I have the fortunate situation where I've been involved in this industry for a very long time. And history will show, Mr. Speaker, that there is a current taxi company that is currently owned and operated by taxi owners and operators, because the government back a few administrations ago took a very strong stance of working with the taxi industry. So, Mr. Speaker, that's just a point of information that the honorable member may not know of. But the history shows that this government has made many concessions, including the one that is in the bill, in the best interest of the taxi industry. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's very interesting to hear that point of information. And why I allowed it was because we've heard from the Bermuda Taxi Owners and Operators Association that is in fact not the case, that they have not been consulted or worked with. And that's something that the minister can work out with them. He doesn't have to work it out with me. But at the end of the day,
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The honorable member from the other side is misleading the House. In my point of information, Mr. Speaker, I never mentioned the current Bermuda Taxi Owners Association. Mr. Speaker, they were not around 25 years ago when I spoke of what the government has done many administrations ago. So while the honorable member is speaking of a current association, the point of information that I made, Mr. Speaker, was one that precedes and predates what we currently have. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
To be clear, you're referencing 25 years ago.
Yes, multiple administrations.
Mr. Speaker, I don't believe that it's truly a point of order. At the end of the day, we are in the present time, and we have to go with what is happening in present day, and we are debating present legislation. This amendment is happening today, and the taxi drivers have made themselves quite clear through the BTOA that they feel as though it hasn't been consultation. And as I said, he can work that out with them. He doesn't need to work it out with me. I am not a member of the BTOA, so that's what it is. And let me segue really quick, Mr. Speaker, because I hear a lot of chatter in this chamber, and I want to be clear that these taxi drivers and the rideshare, all of us are part of this community at the end of the day, right? And it's okay to make these comments on the floor of this house, but you have to face those folks at the end of it. And I'm almost certain that we don't want to let this debate segue into that. So let's just stick to what we're talking about, and that's the amendment tonight. Taxi drivers continue to service 87% of our visitors. So this particular amendment is not addressing the core and systemic issues that are currently plaguing our transport system. So you have an enforcement issue, and by dumping more cars and more rideshare drivers into this particular thing, it is going to bleed into any new layer of transport that we introduce. And I take point that, do we know that all drivers are on the road 16 hours? Do we know that how many taxi drivers are truly in operation on the road? And this is some of the same issues we will have with rideshare. Because if we are not proving to the public that we can properly police and manage what we have now, how can they have faith that we will be able to police and manage a new layer to this transport system? And keep in mind that this is tied to the dispatchers. And at this time, there has not been any concrete solutions given to the dispatchers about unlicensed and unregulated dispatching that is happening now, where people are basically going around the licensed dispatchers. And so how is adding rideshare going to fix that issue? And this is why we say you must prove first that you can enforce what you have, because at the end of the day, we can see rideshare drivers fall into the same habits of not servicing certain parts of the area. This is not about whether you're pro or for taxi drivers. This is about how are we going to ensure that this works best for the public, and it's not working now. And the same issues that are plaguing the taxi industry will be the same issues plaguing rideshare drivers, but for a cheaper cost. And so, how do we know that there is truly a supply and demand here when we don't even have our current system functioning optimally? So if right now, if it was 600 taxis on the road running 16 hours a day, would we still be discussing rideshare? So at the end of the day, are we truly addressing the systemic issues that are coming forward from the industry, who is asking government to properly regulate? They are asking government for more enforcement, and for some reason it seems like they refuse to comply and wish to go and add more layers to that without addressing that particular thing. Right now, there are claims that the regulations of the current industry, such as limos, minibuses, and taxis, are not on par right now with each other. So now you add a fourth category, and this is something that I cannot find the logic in, and that's what I was hoping to hear from the minister as to what was the statistics that led us here. And I recall 8-year-old data that was cited in a previous debate, but that is not addressing the issues that have been brought forward now. And there is also another layer to this, is that a lot of folks believe, and this is something that has been prevalent in the community, that there is a special interest in getting this particular legislation passed. And again, we heard recently that there are now 3 dispatch companies, even though now the BTOA has one that has been given a license, which is good to hear. But there is also folks that are high up in this government that have interest in one of these dispatch companies that is set to create a...
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order.
Because what I will not allow, Mr. Speaker, is for this debate to go. No, the debate, the interest is declared on the what's it called, and before we go further down this, before we go down this road, we all know, and it is a matter of public record, that I am a shareholder of Hitch Limited, which is a licensed dispatcher. It is on the register of public interest. It is there. So the honorable member does not have to allude and say anything else. Those are the facts. And as I have said on this House before, I have no operational involvement with that company since I have been the premier of this country. And I want that to be clear. Let us debate let's debate the policy and the law in front of us, and not personalities, Mr. Speaker. And I sincerely know that you will make sure this debate goes on that good road.
And the fact that you've raised it, I hope that crosses the line for any debate going forward after our last issue of addressing this before we broke for Christmas. That that type of debate of personalities and personal issues do not enter into any of our debates going forward from either member of this House, any member of this House. Member?
And I put it that way to avoid that, to be honest, Mr. Speaker, but it is the truth. And that is, I'm speaking about how it is perceived in the community and in the industry. And I am going to say that it's everybody, because obviously we can't generalize, but this is a prevalent point. And I do believe that it hasn't been enough to address that point to make people feel comfortable with it. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. I'll leave it right there. So there's no doubt that this particular amendment will devalue a taxi permit. You literally now will have folks paying $1,000 per annum.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order.
The honorable member is misleading the House. He is saying that this will devalue the taxi permit. The taxi permit is not based off of the number of permits given. Its value is increased every year by cost of living 2%, which has been done since 1953.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would invite that honorable member to explain how a taxi driver would satisfy not wanting to become a rideshare driver and pay $1,000 per annum and do the exact same thing. There is nothing. There is none.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order.
The honorable member is misleading the House again. A rideshare cannot do the exact same thing as a taxi. Taxis can apply for hire. Rideshares cannot.
Continue, member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I see this is going to be quite a excitable one. So, at the end of the day, right? At the end of the day, right? If the legislation in this amendment stands as long as there are taxi drivers to still give priority to, if that is not the case, what happens? And that is something that, we need to think about here. In the end, I want to make very clear that the One Bermuda Alliance supports modernization of the transport industry and providing a good service for our customers. But we do not support dodging systemic issues in favor of Band-Aid fixes such as this. And so, at the end of the day, that will be judged by history. And I hope that we understand that what happens in this chamber, it will matriculate outside. And we, on this side of the House, want to see systemic changes such as proper enforcement in our current industry to make way for this. And also to clarify that, as it was stated, this is not an option for people. It is a catch-all, and it is dodging what is actually going on. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member. Does any other member wish to make a contribution? Minister?
Good evening, Mr. Speaker. Good evening, colleagues. Mr. Speaker, we know, and the one thing that I can say about this topic, and I think we can all say about this topic, is there's no shortage of comments, commentary, suggestions, solutions, and what everyone thinks is going wrong. But what we cannot deny, and I'll speak especially to the member who just took his seat, is that this has been going on for far too long. Now, Mr. Speaker, as a collector of political memorabilia, I have in my hand some sketches or political cartoons that appeared in the Royal Gazette in the mid-'80s. This one is a picture of the then tourism minister sitting on a briefcase with cobwebs, tourists coming out of the airport, and Sir George Summers saying taxi. Underneath it says, "Save your breath, St. George. There's no easier way of getting one here than in St. George's." Speaking about the taxi industry, 40 plus years ago. I think the member that sat down would know the history of this, being a little less than 40 right now. Another one from the Bermuda Sun. We all remember Bermuda Sun. Shows, yeah, before he was born. Shows a man and a woman holding a net, and he's saying, "Get ready, one comes now," meaning they're trying to snag a taxi. This is what we're talking about coming back from the 80s. And I'll pass these so we can see.
Are you actually tabling or just?
I can table them.
There you are. Table them, put them where table them, make sure they end up here.
Here you go. I'll table this while I have copies of them because I can find them quite interesting. So, Mr. Speaker, what we're discussing here is multi-generational issues. We're not talking about something that just happened yesterday. The discussion about securing a taxi is something that all of us have heard stories about. All of us have probably experienced, I know I have myself personally. But, Mr. Speaker, one thing I did not hear the speaker that just sat down, because he talked about we're straddling the fence, but he only talked about the taxi industry. What about the people who are affected by this? This is a real human issue. What about the person who's missed their doctor's appointment because they can't find a ride? Because someone didn't want to pick them up from Middletown to bring them into Hamilton? What about the person who hasn't been able to pick up their child on time because a taxi didn't show up? What about that family function you want to go to, that you go to every year, but nobody shows up to get you? What about the time you just want to get home from town, nothing goes, nothing comes, and you got to walk? And last but not least, what about that person who's wheelchair bound, or that senior who needs that car so they could just get out of the house, and their taxi has been canceled or doesn't show up, Mr. Speaker? That is the human aspect of this that we need to take into account. So as I said, Mr. Speaker, this is a historical issue that we're dealing with here. We've heard the similar complaints before, and again, for the speaker who just sat down. In 1992, we had the price gouging issue at the airport. The then government stepped in with a solution. You know what the response was from the taxi industry? Why don't you just enforce the rules? Sounds familiar? In 1996, government launched a commission to look into the taxi industry. The response from the taxi industry? Boycott the survey. In the year 2000, GPS was introduced, Mr. Speaker. In 2004, the taxis went on a 10-day strike so they wouldn't have to put GPSs in their system. And again, enforce the rules. 2019, a green paper was established. And again, push back on some of the solutions with the ring-all, catch-all phrase, enforce the rules. And now we stand here today hearing the same excuses, Mr. Speaker. This is a recurring theme, Mr. Speaker, going back over 4 decades. To anything the government has tried to bring forth has been enforce the rules. But, Mr. Speaker, I am somewhat confused. And I'm going to explain why I'm confused, Mr. Speaker. In virtually every professional organization here in Bermuda, it is the profession that polices their members. Why do they do that? Because they know if one of their members is out of line and doing things wrong and incorrectly, it reflects on all of them. So what we're having here is an admittance by the BTOA that their members are just electing to willfully not obey the rules. But what they're saying is, we won't encourage them to obey the rules. We want you to do it. And if you don't do it, things just need to stay how they are. How does that even make sense, Mr. Speaker? How does that even make sense? But, Mr. Speaker, I'm not here to bash the taxi industry. I'm only here to point out the obvious. Mr. Speaker, for nearly 8 years, my office was at 44 Church Street. For those that don't know that, that's the BHC building right next to Marketplace. For 8 years, Mr. Speaker, I walked out of that building and there was a lineup of what we call gypsy cabs waiting to take people home for their groceries. After 8 years, Mr. Speaker, you get to know these guys and you talk to them. They had weekly and daily trips set up. Pick someone up, bring them, get their groceries, take that person and go back. And I can, Mr. Speaker, probably count on one hand the amount of times I saw a taxi pull up to actually help these people who just wanted to go do their grocery shopping. Now, if someone can do that for 8 years, and I'm assuming much longer than that, surely they're making money from it, Mr. Speaker. Surely they are making money from it. And the fact that the industry won't even bother to come and help those people tells us what, Mr. Speaker? It tells us that there is no interest in self-regulation. It's only an interest when the minister brings legislation that says we're going to provide additional services. That's the only time we really hear anybody make any noise about that, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, we also hear about where's the data? What is actually in place to make us do that, Mr. Speaker? But I'll speak to some data, Mr. Speaker, if you allow me to read here. The GAP score. The GAP score for transportation reliability, which measures the difference between visitor importance and satisfaction. It's at 26% in 2004 and is around 25% in 2005.
Where does the data come from?
The data is coming from the Department of Transportation. Okay. While taxis touch 90% of visitors, satisfaction numbers show only 50%, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, in 2025, there were 257,883 ride requests, and over 82,000 of them went unanswered, Mr. Speaker. That's a staggering 32% of all ride requests that were not just answered. So, Mr. Speaker, this legislation before us is a measured response to the issue that we are talking about today. It introduces a cashless ride-share system that the minister has spoken to quite eloquently. But, Mr. Speaker, what was omitted from the speaker who spoke before me's presentation is that this ride share is different than what you would find in other jurisdictions. It goes beyond what they're offering because it introduces protections for the taxi industry up front. Protections, Mr. Speaker. A taxi must not answer the call before a ride share can be summoned. That, you don't get any more protection than that. You say there's enough taxis on the road that can service the people, then ride sharing will never be an issue because they'll always show up when someone calls, Mr. Speaker. There are licensing restrictions. Only those who have the PSV licenses are able to be ride shares. So, as the young member that sat down before me, that is taxi. That is people who drive taxis. So they might just want to do this if they wish. It's only seasonal, Mr. Speaker. It's not going to be all year long, and it's on limited hours if you're using rideshare. It's cashless and digital. You can't hail a taxi from the side of the. You can't hail a rideshare from the side of the road. As the minister points out, you cannot line up and wait for someone to hop in your car. You have to be attached to the app, and the app will only call you once no taxis have answered that call, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and I was waiting for this to happen because the member who sat before has said this numerous times in the public domain, and he talks about systematic versus Band-Aid solutions and the like, Mr. Speaker. He's publicly said the OBA doesn't support Band-Aid solutions, which he's equating this to, Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Speaker, that argument is extremely weak when you look at the history of the One Barbuda Alliance when it comes to legislation such as this. The legislative historical narrative is weak because all I heard was talking points from a letter that was received from the BTOA that was sent to all of us. And from when I'm looking at the historical narrative of the One Barbuda Alliance, to me, it comes across as just pandering, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in 2012, the One Barbuda Alliance promised the taxi drivers we'll get rid of GPS. Why did they say that? They said that because the Progressive Labor Party government had said that we will have some sort of gentleman's agreement where we won't mark your taxi as being won't take your taxi off the road if you don't have the GPS in it. They said, you're pandering to the taxi drivers. We're going to change the law, Mr. Speaker. The taxi drivers, and I'll quote, Mr. Speaker, a quote from the Royal Gazette, April 22nd, 2013. The One Barbuda Alliance dismissed the PLP's pledge is electioneering and vowed it would make the system optional rather than compulsory should it ever become the government. And of course, as the story goes on, the driver has accused the One Barbuda government, the One Barbuda Alliance government of reneging on its election promises. It's very disappointed as the people of this country have been lied again to by the OBA government. Last night, the Transport Ministry, I'm reading the Royal Gazette, a story. I'm reading the Royal Gazette. But anyway, Mr. Speaker, I'm speaking of the One Barbuda Alliance and their insistence on making election promises or making promises based on hearsay, based on things they think that's going to get persons to like them, but not following through. All we have to do is look back at 2025 with the election reform bill, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order.
The honourable member, unfortunately, is getting personal and misleading the public. No one is looking for anyone to like anyone. It's about good legislation. And I take offense to the fact that he would think that we're trying to put legislation in place for likes.
I think we made a comment earlier about keeping the personalities out of it. Any little door like that slips you down the wrong road.
Well, I do apologize for that, Mr. Speaker, and I'll take your guidance. It wasn't personal to any one particular person. When you have a philosophy of thought, I was just speaking to the philosophy of thought, Mr. Speaker. I know we went through it in this House when we dealt with the election reform bill, and despite offers to work with and come up with a bipartisan bill, it was still moved forward and eventually ruled inadmissible, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, as I started what I said, inaction today has a human cost. And that human cost is what I said, the senior at home not able to get out of their house, the mother unable to pick up her child, the person unable to get to the grocery store to pick up groceries, the missed appointment, the having to walk home because a taxi won't show up, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this government has done the hard work for taxi drivers, despite what anyone says. We've cut payroll tax by 40%. We've made vehicle parts duty-free, Mr. Speaker. We've done what needs to be done to ensure that taxi drivers are getting the benefit of the doubt so they can do the work that they do. But, Mr. Speaker, despite that hard work to make it easier to operate a taxi, we still find ourselves in the position we find ourselves that these cartoons from the 80s depict. The simple narrative is, if you wish to find taxis, they are difficult to find. If you go and ask anyone will give you a story about waiting hours for a taxi to show up. That's the data that we're going by, Mr. Speaker. We are responding to the needs of our visitors, we are responding to the needs of our residents, and we are responding to their needs that they're asking us to put things in place. I believe what the minister has brought today is practical. It hits the right mark. It balances between protecting the taxi industry and providing additional services for our people. And that, Mr. Speaker, is what we're talking about today. And that, Mr. Speaker, is legislation that's worthy of approval in this House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Does any other member wish to make a contribution? MP Fay, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the previous speaker made some comments with which I will agree. Right off the bat, the taxi industry is notoriously difficult to deal with. I sat in the current minister's seat for a year as Minister of Tourism and Transport. And we introduced as a government some things that were not very popular with the taxi drivers. So in the first instance, I don't think you can call us weak. We introduced minicar legislation that in itself made the taxi drivers go on a strike for a day or two and blockade hotels and things. And I was a minister in charge at that period of time. And it wasn't fun. Now, there were members of that other side that said to me that if they became government, they would not increase the number of mini cars, and of course they came into government, and now we have two-seater mini cars, and there's more and more. So my point is that people's minds can be changed based on the circumstances of an industry. Now, here's what I looked at, because I can tell you that I was not the friends of taxi drivers for a very long time here. I would be worried about getting a taxi. I said, well, you're the guy that brought in mini cars. So it's not about pandering here in any way, shape, or form. It's looking and saying, what is the time and when should you pass certain piece of legislation? We can all have stories, Mr. Speaker, of being unable to get a taxi here and abroad. It happens to all of us anywhere you go. Now, what the government did do is present a green paper in 2019, and it was the Deputy Premier who actually, I think, was the Minister of Transport and presented that paper. And the statement that he read at the time, and I have it here, it's 17th of May 2019. I'm happy to prepare to send that around. And the minister, and I'll quote what he said, "We will start by implementing many of the hundreds of recommendations offered by our stakeholders, who included residents, students, managers within public authorities, business groups, and visitors regarding, for example, supporting taxi and minibus solutions relating to rates, central dispatching, and credit card acceptance. Credit card acceptance, I don't believe, is mandatory, and we don't have central dispatching, so that never happened. Issuing 20 new special taxi permits of the 88 special permits allowed by legislation for 5 years to see if this will help alleviate some of the demand problems experienced at peak times and late in the evenings. I'm not sure what the outcome of that was. I just don't know, because it's not been really talked about. Implementing speed camera and stoplight initiatives. Well, we know that's not there. And it goes on. There's lots of things here that have talked about ways in which that we can improve transport on Bermuda. That's the first thing. But the thing I think that's of most importance, and that's what my colleague, Mr. Robinson, has been talking about, is we're putting the cart before the horse. I don't have an issue with the idea of rideshare. But there are so many other things that have been identified first that we should try with all haste before we take that next step. Now, why do I say that, Mr. Speaker? Well, on pages 82 and 83 of the Transport Green Paper, it laid out stakeholder comments and thoughts, and they're extensive. None of them in that particular piece, and you can look it up again, page 82 and 83 of the Green Paper from the government, actually goes into details of rideshare. And in fact, if you look at 4.8.4 in that same Green Paper, it actually says, it's a throwaway line, I only found it today. It said the government said that they'd given instructions to TCD to enforce the 16-hour taxi rule for them being on the road. Now, we know that never happened. So it's very strange to say, oh, efforts have been made. They have not. So it seems like what we're doing is just adding more problems to things that have already not happened. You cannot self-police. So the previous speaker said, well, the taxi industry is not self-policing. That's not their job. It's the job of TCD enforcement officers to make sure that the taxis are doing what they're supposed to be doing under the legislation. It seems to me that if we don't want the 16-hour rule
Point
in
of order,
place,
Mr. Speaker.
Point of order?
The honourable member from the other side is misleading the House, Mr. Speaker. He is saying that it is the job of TCD to enforce, and they are not doing so. Mr. Speaker, every single day, the Transport Control Department has a team of traffic enforcement officers that go out throughout this island to enforce the traffic laws of this country, including those of the taxi drivers. So to say, Mr. Speaker, to say that TCD is not enforcing is incorrect, and he's misleading the House, Mr. Speaker.
Point taken.
okay, Mr. Speaker, maybe they are enforcing on certain regulations. Don't know, we haven't seen the data, and that's part of the problem. Maybe the minister can bring to the House the number of enforcements that have been brought against taxis for not doing 16 hours a day. That won't be coming, because it's not being done. How many taxi drivers have been said, you've got to go home and change, because there's regulations that say what they're supposed to wear? If these things are antiquated, change the legislation. Take it out of legislation. Say that it's broken, we just can't do the job. Take it out. And then we can look and we can say, look, that's really not working, folks. We're going to do it some other way. And that's not been happening. I'm going to take the liberty, if I may, with your leave, because it's a bit of reading, but I think it's important to share with the House and remind colleagues of what the government's own Green Paper said about the feedback that they got. And we can do a poll. How many actually have been done before we jump to rideshare?
That's out of the Green Paper?
That's from the Green Paper, pages 82 and 83, Mr. Speaker. Establish a central dispatching service to better regulate the taxi industry under one umbrella and require each taxi operator to have a binding contract for each licensed taxi.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order?
I know the honourable member knows better as a learned member, but the fact is that a green paper that is produced for transportation lists all the options that are given by persons. I do not believe that he's representing what the government policy is. And I think it's important that you distinguish, because green papers collect options and are for discussion purposes. So I just want him to make sure that he's clear and crystal on those things as he continues his debate.
So he's reading from the Green Paper, which were opinions or options that were presented.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I certainly did not in any way say it was government policy. I said I'm reading from stakeholder comments and thoughts. And I said that right from the beginning. Okay, and I also said what the previous minister said, that we will start by implementing many of the hundreds of recommendations by our stakeholders. And I listed out the people that the minister said would be, that gave that feedback. There was no white paper, I don't believe, that actually then laid out all the things that they would do. So they're cherry picking from these comments and thoughts, because that's the only place that they've been published. There's no draft legislation that was published before, after all of this happened in that green paper. We know the data that was used was from prior to that, because that's what the minister said in the previous, last week when he tabled the bill. So this is the problem. We're ignoring all of the other suggestions that could be done to solve the problem. The thing is this.
Mr. Speaker.
Could be done.
Mr. Speaker, the honorable member is misleading the House. Since 2019, there's been numerous advancements and things that are done on the particular matters that were raised inside the green paper. He's picking the ones that were not done. It's not okay to say that. Rather, the things that have been done by numerous ministers of transport in this government, which have been passed in this thing, such as extension hours, such as increasing particular matters. So we can't say that nothing was done, Mr. Speaker. That is not correct.
To prevent any up and down like we're having right now, the member was reading from the green paper suggestions. You read the green paper suggestions, and when other members rise to make their contributions, they can say what was done or what wasn't done. They can highlight that. The members just simply reading the green paper, and it's from the opinion of the stakeholders. That's what I just highlight.
I want to talk about Hitch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Second, introduce taxi fare flat zones instead of rates 1, 2, and 3 and surcharges like the minibuses. Then everyone knows how much it will cost to go from point A to point B. Make provision for more taxis with motorized wheelchair accessibility. Increase taxi rates by allowing rate 3 to start at 10 p.m. instead of midnight. Reduce taxi rates as they're too expensive. Enforce the taxi 16-hour per day rule and amend legislation so that every vehicle taxi permit is required to have 2 drivers to fulfill the 16-hour rule. Revoke the taxi permits of operators who do not have their vehicle on the road 16 hours a day. Make it illegal for taxi drivers to be selective in routes and short distances. Solves part of the problem that the minister made mention of when he tabled and said a lot of taxis won't go that short distance to Glebe Road. It's the same what the previous speaker said, that people won't go, taxis won't go some of those short distances. Require all taxi operators to accept credit cards. Implement an online custom reporting process to bring issues relating to taxi operators before the Public Services Vehicles Licensing Board for appropriate action. Utilize a taxi app to satisfy demand during periods when taxis are generally not on the road after 5 p.m. and on weekends and holidays, some of the very stuff that this legislation is apparently going to fix. Taxi drivers should be required to pass a test or be interviewed every few years to ensure their skills remain satisfactory in terms of service quality and general knowledge. Amend taxi regulations for tours. Don't think that's relevant for this debate. Amend taxi regulations to allow the maximum number of passengers to increase from 7 to 8. Implement an island-wide taxi share program with per passenger fare book on demand via an app. Create a fee for passengers only to pay if they vomit in a taxi. And then it goes on about different permits that can be done. So I've read, for the Premier's edification, every single one of those points. This House can determine which of those perhaps could have been considered in more detail prior to this legislation being brought. That's the concern that I certainly have and that this side of the House has. That's the cart before the horse. Some of the concerns, Mr. Speaker, is I'm hearing that this is seasonal. And again, another minister, Minister Ferbert at the time, had said this, and this is 20th of March, 2024. And again, this is an article from the World Gazette, and I can hand that around as well. Transport Minister expands on rideshare program. Some of the highlights of ride sharing are as follows. Requiring a rideshare operator to secure a public vehicle license means the public can be assured the operator has been vetted, some of what we've heard today. This is a seasonal service. Now, I heard that. I didn't see that in the legislation. Operates daily from 1st of April to September 30th and only on weekends and holidays the rest of the year. And participating insurance companies have agreed to collaborate with the ministry to establish a practical approach to coverage, so also ensure maximum safety for the traveling public. Perhaps the minister can expand on that when he has further remarks about that level of insurance. Have those programs been put in place? Presumably the regulations are going to deal with the seasonality. What's the limit? Is it going to be 150 like was previously said by a previous minister? Or is it going to be based on data, which is lacking? Again, it is lacking data to make these types of decisions. No one wants to be left waiting. We accept that. But the key here is that enforcement isn't being done now. So what faith does the public have that enforcement will be done on all of the rideshare vehicles? It just isn't happening. I struggle to understand how, if this is so important, and in 40 years, none of us have done it. It's not just the other side. It wasn't just the OBA. It wasn't just CBP. None of us did it properly. And that's why we're here, because we've just let it go and we go, it's not our problem. I don't want to deal with the taxi drivers. Maybe people didn't enforce because they wanted to be popular and they didn't want protests from taxi drivers. But this is the interesting thing. In the conversations that a number of us on this side of the House have had, Mr. Speaker, with representatives from the taxi industry, and look, we all have them. We all have them. We're taking taxis and the drivers are chatting to us. They do say that they want enforcement. So if the industry is begging for it and saying, enforce it, do it, we will be behind you on it, then why wouldn't we do it?
Point of information, Mr.
Don't
Speaker.
understand.
Point
if
of
I may.
information? Do you want to take a point of information?
No, I don't need to take the point of information. Thank you. So that's the key. And I guess I'm just not understanding at all on this, that we're just basically going to accept as legislators, the legislation says what has to happen now, and we all kind of just are saying, oh, it doesn't matter. It's all right. Let it happen. Leave that in there, and let's bring in these other drivers that don't have 16 hours, presumably, because it's not on their legislation. They can pick up rides, do it when they wish. We don't have any draft regulations. Now, before anyone jumps up and says that's normally how it happens, yes, I accept that. But there's so many things that have to be decided in relation to this about how this is going to work. Now, I went online today and I found this interesting ride-sharing frequently asked questions from the government website about how this legislation is going to work. There's a wealth of information in there. And it talks about this code of practice, which is in the legislation, okay? But I'd like to see the code of practice. I think if we're going to pass this, let's have as much details as we want, because it is a fundamental change, fundamental for Bermuda. Whilst there have been ride-share different programs globally, it has not yet happened here. So let's make sure we get it right. We've had enough time. We've seen comic strips from the 80s. So another month, another 6 months isn't going to kill this off, but at least tell us, do the enforcement. Get those enforcement officers. Make
Point of
sure they're on the
information,
street.
Mr. Speaker.
I'm not going to
Point of
take it,
information?
Mr. Speaker.
Would you like to take a point of
No,
information?
thank you. I'm sure the minister can wrap up it however which way he pleases.
Keep noting
when
your
it's
point of
time.
information, and
Okay.
you can put it in your wrap-up address.
So this isn't a popularity contest. Believe me, the public, I'm sure, is going to be happy to have this. But it's about doing the right thing as legislators to say, we have these pieces that are not being done now, so what are we doing to make sure that this program is going to work? Because I don't have the faith that it will. Now, I would invite the government, if this goes forward, bring back some amendments and remove some of the requirements so that we're not having to think about this anymore. We can't beat them with that stick and say, oh, there's 16 hours. It just won't be there. but fix the industry. Don't be afraid to make those decisions. Instead, what we're doing is we're taking the easy route here, in my view. We're not going to do the hard work to make the industry work well. Especially we know at the numbers that are for transfer of taxi permits, the livelihoods of the taxi drivers that have invested in their vehicles. All of these things, these are business people that have invested generations of family members, people doing it as a second job. Right? This is what we're taking away potentially from people. And I struggle with that. We have lots of stories about how taxi drivers have put their whole family through college and the like. I think that's amazing. So why are we again going to take that from them? I don't get it. And believe me, I am not the friend of the taxi industry. I'm just not.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order?
The honorable member is leading the House. He cannot come here and speak to a bill that gives taxi drivers first preference and say that livelihoods are being taken away from people. He must be honest in the policy that we're actually debating and not what he thinks it is.
Mr. Speaker, in every industry, in every market, rideshare has decimated the taxi industry, whichever way you say it. And here's the thing. No, here's the thing. How do we enforce? We're not going to enforce. We don't enforce now. What gives anyone in this House the confidence it's going to be enforced properly? So the Premier himself has to be thinking about this, because at the moment I'm not seeing it. I'm just not. No, listen.
Mr. Speaker,
I
point
want
of
those
information,
rights. I would like to
please.
know about the enforcement. It's as simple as that.
The members,
Okay.
the members got.
Sorry, point of order. I'm
You
sorry.
asked for
I said it
point of
wrong. I said it
information.
wrong. Point of order. Please, Mr. Speaker. I apologize. Point of order. The honorable member from the other side is misleading the House. In one moment, in one breath, he is accusing us of taking it from them, meaning taxi drivers' business. And in the other sentence, Mr. Speaker, he is hammering on enforcement, which means taking drivers' permits from them. He cannot have it both ways, and that is misleading the House, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Continue.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Come
The
on.
taxi industry themselves is asking for enforcement. They want to protect their own industry as well from the people that aren't doing the things that they're supposed to be doing. That's the point. That is where we are with this legislation, Mr. Speaker. I think I've made my points absolutely clear. We've cherry-picked, I think the government has cherry-picked from the Green Paper. Ironically, it doesn't talk about rideshare on those points. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Is there any other member? MP, Minister Ferbert?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Here we are today, Mr. Speaker. Some other members have spoken about some 40 years later. Providing for a solution for a problem that we have, Mr. Speaker. And we've known about this problem for many, many, many years. And we are taking some steps to do something about it. Mr. Speaker, for a time such as this, a very own minister, having experience in the taxi industry himself, who knows all about enforcement, he knows all about the options in the white paper, sorry, the green paper, but we are making a step today to do something about a transportation service that has not been 100% reliable to its customer base. We want a transportation service to be able to get people from A to B. And I just want to take the opportunity to just speak about reliability. Because part of the problem, Mr. Speaker, is that transportation reliability remains Bermuda's single largest visitor service gap in the 2019 Transport Green Paper. It identifies transportation availability and reliability as being a problem. If you allow me, Mr. Speaker, to break down what reliability means, it means, Mr. Speaker, rely means to depend on or to trust someone or something. The able in reliability means capable of or able to be. The ity in reliability means to turn on, means the state or the quality of. The ability to be trusted, consistent, and dependable. And to put it in a sentence, Mr. Speaker, customers value the reliability of a service that consistently delivers quality service. Mr. Speaker, the frequency in which we call on something or a service is because it is reliable. You call on your plumber time after time because I hope they are reliable. The plumber of your choosing. You call on the electrician because they are reliable, Mr. Speaker. You call on the salesperson, the painter, the doctor, the lawyer, the cleaner, and event planner over and over again because they are reliable. You will keep calling the same service provider back if the service is good. If it's not good, Mr. Speaker, you won't keep calling them back. And loyalty really only lasts, Mr. Speaker, so long if that service is reliable. Mr. Speaker, when we are making time, whenever we are going somewhere, we're making time, we need proper options of mobility, Mr. Speaker. And it creates many times for urgent situation because we need to get to one place to the next. If we are unable to get to the next destination, it delays progress in whatever it is that we're choosing to do next. If the taxi service or any service, Mr. Speaker, is not reliable, the use of it reduces, right? So, if you have a friend and you keep asking them to go out all the time, they keep telling you no, what do? You stop asking them. If you use a drug, Mr. Speaker, and it doesn't have the same effect, Mr. Speaker, you stop using it. The issue, Mr. Speaker, I don't think it's really with the presence of the taxi. The issue is the access to the taxi. The access to a taxi in a timely manner. Reliable transportation, Mr. Speaker, is important. It's important to a mother and a father who's trying to get their child to school. It is important to a daughter who is trying to get their mother to a doctor's visit. It is important, Mr. Speaker, for someone who may be out on the streets a late night, who may have had too much toddies or Tito's that night, to be able to get home safely, Mr. Speaker, so that they are not putting themselves or others at harm. It's important to have a reliable transportation service, Mr. Speaker. What's not reliable, Mr. Speaker, is the 161,000 cancellations that has been reported by dispatch in 2024. What is not reliable, Mr. Speaker, is having to wait for a taxi more than 30 minutes. Mr. Speaker, what is not reliable, as Minister Rebane spoke about, is the $130,000 unanswered ride request. Mr. Speaker, mobility creates stability for a country. We know that our number one pillar here of our economy is international business. Our second pillar, Mr. Speaker, is tourism. If you go to any other country, Mr. Speaker, transportation is not a problem because of access. And we need to improve upon our access. We need to improve upon our tourism product as it relates to transportation for people to get around, to get about our islands. If we are really serious about tourism, Mr. Speaker, we will want to get this transportation issue right. Now, I'm not saying that this will be perfect, because I'm sure once this legislation is enacted, we will learn some things, Mr. Speaker, and all the data, I mean, just sheer data, but all the data that we're talking about, because we have not been able to fully collect because this system is not whole, we will be able to collect more data, Mr. Speaker, to make changes, to make amendments, to make things better for transportation for our people who are trying to get about Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, today I wear a pin and it says, accessibility should not be complicated. I really stand on my feet today, Mr. Speaker, because I represent persons with disabilities who have limited accessibility transportation options. The amendments to this Motor Car Act, Mr. Speaker, will provide accessibility options for persons with disabilities. We have gone too long, Mr. Speaker, without providing solutions for persons in our community and our visitors to not have access to accessible vehicles. One day, Mr. Speaker, I was on Front Street, just outside of where the birdcage was. And there was a taxi driver, you know, he was very willing to help this user, the person in a wheelchair, person who was wheelchair bound. He was very willing to help this person to get into their taxi. And I watched how they struggled, Mr. Speaker. They struggled. It was for a good 15 minutes trying to get this person in this taxi. They eventually succeeded. The person actually had to crawl into the taxi. And then they lifted their wheelchair and put it in the back. But that's not how persons should have access to vehicles, Mr. Speaker. It's not humane, Mr. Speaker. So what this does, it does provide an option for wheelchair users, because we have fallen short in the transportation industry, particularly taxis, as it relates to accessibility. And I believe reading in the Green Paper back in 2018, there were 3 taxis, Mr. Speaker. 3 taxis in 2018. I'm not sure what the number is today, but I know it's a very small number as well that provide accessibility options for persons in our community. Now, a PC car, private car, that is an accessible vehicle, can make themselves available for transportation services. And what's good about this, Mr. Speaker? PC drivers already have experience transporting persons in wheelchairs. They have the practical experience and the comfort levels, because I'm sure there is a reason why persons have not gone into accessibility is because they have not been comfortable with transporting persons with disabilities. But Houston, now we have a solution. We finally have a solution. Today, Mr. Speaker, International Women's Day, the Woman of the Year, Dr. Letitia Lister, had asked those in the audience at Pier 6 today, she asked, Mr. Speaker, who's taking care of each generation, the young, the old, and the in-between, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, today, we are making sure we are taking care of the young, the old, the in-between, Mr. Speaker, and most of all, those with disabilities who will now have access to a ride. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Does any other Honorable Member wish to make a contribution at this time? Any other? MP Scott?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, are you aware or are you familiar with the the Baader-Meinhof effect? Now, the Baader-Meinhof effect dates back basically to the 1990s. There was a gentleman named Terry Mullen, and he was reading a newspaper, and he came across this unusual term, which was the Baader-Meinhof group. And he did some research and he found out that the Baader-Meinhof group was a German terrorist organization from the 1970s. And he had never heard of them before. And something strange happened right after that. The next day, he read about Baader-Meinhof in another news article. The following week, he saw it in another news article. He saw it on TV. And over the course of the month, Baader-Meinhof was seemingly everywhere. And so Terry thought that this was too big of a coincidence and wrote about it to one of his local newspapers and put it in a newspaper column, and the phenomenon exploded after that. Everyone was saying they had experienced the exact same thing. Even persons in this honorable house. You learn a new word, and then suddenly it's in every conversation you have. You buy a red car, and now all of a sudden you see a bunch of red cars all on the road. You get engaged, and it seems like everybody around you is also getting engaged. And so what happens is that there are people that feel as though that the universe is messing with them.
How about divorce?
That too, right? They feel like the universe is messing with them, but psychologists have identified exactly what is going on. It's two things that are happening: selective attention and confirmation bias. And so what happens is that your brain is now primed to notice something that was always there before, and you tend to see the things again and again, but you then don't realize how many times you had ignored it in the past. And so an example, when we come to this bill, an example of the Baader-Meinhof effect is that a lot of people won't remember that former Minister Zane De Silva proposed this very thing. And the taxi industry basically crucified him for doing so. However, when I became minister, I went through and I proposed a totally different way of modernizing the transportation system. And do you know what the taxi industry did? They came back to me and proposed this very thing. So the same thing that they had crucified the previous minister before me, they then came and told me that this is what we should actually be doing. The Baader-Meinhof effect. And so, Mr. Speaker, what happens is that the issue we have, and I understand this issue, and I'll declare my interest that I am a manager at Rosewood, Bermuda. And you try getting a taxi from Rosewood to the Lauren, Rosewood to even town, anytime after 10 o'clock.
Or St. George's.
St. George's is even worse, right? Anytime after 10 o'clock, between 10 p.m., even up to 6 a.m., you are having significant troubles. I have had to take passengers. I've had to take guests in my own personal car. Amen. Because we can't get the taxis. And so the rideshare policy legislation is attacking that issue right then and there. And so, Mr. Speaker, another example of the Baader-Meinhof effect is that people are quick to say there's no data being shared, that this is not a data-driven policy, this is not a data-driven piece of legislation. But, Mr. Speaker, those people would be ignoring that the Motor Taxi Radio Dispatching Services Regulation 1987 requires dispatchers to share the data with TCD on a regular basis.
What happens?
And so therefore, if there are people out there that are part of a dispatching company saying that DCD is not operating using data, that would suggest that they're not following the legislation as printed. And so the honorable member says enforce it. Very interesting that the honorable member says enforce it, right? Because I'm going to get to that. Stick a pin in that, honorable member Fay. And so then they have another example of the Baader-Meinhof effect is that people will be quick to say that there was no consultation with them, that the government didn't consult with them. Mr. Speaker, I can't speak to a specific number, but I can tell you that former Minister Zane De Silva, before myself, had countless meetings with the taxi industry, some that were very animated in discussions up at Workmen's. I had countless meetings with the taxi industry. I understand that former Minister Wayne Furbert had meetings with the taxi industry. So Dr. Braun had countless meetings with the taxi industry. So those people that are telling you that there was no consultation are just victims of the Baader-Meinhof effect.
Nice.
And so, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to speak to just one, it's two numbers, but it's one main piece of data. The data that TCD has suggests or shows that when a fare comes in or request for fare comes in, how long do you think it takes for a taxi operator to accept that fare? A minute? 2 minutes? 5 minutes? 8.2 seconds. Average time for accepting a fare is 8.2 seconds. Now, what do you think the average wait time is for a passenger?
20 minutes.
No, somebody, honorable member says 20 minutes? No, higher.
40 minutes.
A little lower than 40 minutes, 37 minutes. You could watch the Cosby Show, well, maybe not the Cosby Show, but you could watch a half-hour sitcom, get a soda, a Coke and a smile, and still be waiting for your taxi, Mr. Speaker. All right? And so, therefore, this is supposed to help to reduce the time that we have passengers waiting. Now, I'll admit, I believe the minister, I don't want to speak for the minister, but I'll believe the minister would admit that this is not going to be the silver bullet. This is not the panacea. This is not going to solve all of our transportation issues. But it is a step in the right direction. It is a step towards modernization. And Mr. Speaker, we even heard in this Honorable House earlier today an honorable member be a victim of the Baader-Meinhof effect by talking about the hitch narrative. That this only benefited one online dispatcher, which is incorrect, because the BTOA also have an approved...
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. The member is misleading the House. I never said one company. I said one company was better suited to make a profit off of this. Now, only one company, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, the honorable member just proved my point about the Baader-Meinhof effect. Right? He's ignoring the thousands of times that we have said that this is not about any one individual or putting giving one more of an advantage than the other, because the BTOA have their own app, which will be allowed to and will be able to process all of these ride shares. And the thing is, one thing I like about the BTOA app is that a percentage of every dollar spent or made on the BTOA app goes back into the taxi industry. It goes towards the taxi drivers that need maintenance on their cars, need to probably get some insurance or anything like that. That's the thing I like about the BTOA app, and I'll move forward from there. And so, Mr. Speaker, another key victim of the Baader-Meinhof effect is when persons talk about, and I'm going to pick that pin back out when I said stick a pin in it for Honorable Michael Fay, when he says about enforcement of legislation. Now, I understand that when I was minister, Mr. Speaker, I had to enforce the legislation with the taxi industry. And you know what happened, Mr. Speaker, when I enforced it?
Talk about it.
They said, "How? Hey, come on, man. Why you gotta come and pick on us, man? Why you gotta pick on the young black guys that are out here? I thought you were one of us." No, I'm enforcing the legislation, the same legislation that you said you wanted me to enforce. So let's not be victims of the Bader-Meinhof effect when we talk about enforcement. I'm not saying that we don't need to do it. I'm saying, and I agree, that enforcement is key to success. But it's not. But just because it sounds good now when you're not being enforced, that, oh yeah, that's what we want. We want enforcement. We want enforcement. We want it enforced on others, but we don't necessarily want it enforced on ourselves. And so, therefore, when the government enforces the legislation, it is quick to be turned around or put in the context of attacking the industry. That is not what the government is doing. And Mr. Speaker, I believe that this legislation is a step in the right direction. Having been a person, an individual that has struggled with getting taxis between 10 and 6, keeping in mind that the taxi drivers are the ones that are going to get the right of first refusal. And it only goes down to the ride share if taxi drivers do not pick up the fare or they reject it. And so, Mr. Speaker, the fact that I said that this is a step in the right direction, I'm going to just take the liberty while I'm on my feet to expand on what I feel we should also be looking at. And I would propose and suggest the minister start looking at in moving forward is that maybe we should be doing an evaluation of the industry. And when I say an evaluation of the industry, I'm actually talking about the price of permits. I believe that the price of permits may be undervalued right now because the only thing that is driving the value of the permits is the internal market, the ability for taxi drivers to buy and share or to sell and buy permits. I think we should have an independent contractor come in, take a look at the industry, evaluate the industry, so we know exactly what the permits would be worth, not just based off of the market rate. And I think, Mr. Speaker, this might be seen as a little radical, but I think we need to treat taxi drivers the same way as we treat all of the other public service vehicle operators, and I say bus drivers and ferry drivers. We should be able to find a way, which is going to take some creative thinking, to be able to provide them with standardized health insurance, Mr. Speaker. I've heard many a times, and I've heard many of a situation where taxi drivers have given their life to the industry, and they've ended up on their sick bed, but don't have the revenue or the finances available to cover their medical insurance. They are public service vehicle operators. The public service vehicle includes buses and ferries, and I believe they should be we should find a way to provide them with standardized health care. Mr. Speaker,
Standardized health care.
Mr. Speaker, what this government is in the process of doing is to create an environment where our public service vehicle operators can not only sustain the quality of life they believe that they deserve, but should be able to thrive well amongst that. And we also, as a government, need to create an environment where this is sustainable. And we have succession planning for such, so that as generations hand the baton from one generation to the other, there's always a generation of public service vehicle owners and operators ready to take the torch moving forward, and to be able to continue to move our passengers, our tourists, our visitors, our locals alike, all around the island, because they are the lifeblood of our economy. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP Scott. Does any other member wish to make a contribution at this time? Any other? Minister Wilson?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise this evening to address the concern of many parents across Bermuda that we all share, and that's the ability to get our young adult children home safely after a night out, whether they are home from school, as my children sometimes do come home, and they meet their friends in Hamilton for dinner, for a gathering, an event, etc., and then they have to make their way home to Somerset. On one specific occasion, early when my daughter had returned home, she was stranded, and that's never happened again because my husband will leave home from Somerset to meet her, to bring her home. And that particular concern, I know, is shared across the board. And the statistics from the GAP the GAP statistics speak for themselves. On a typical Friday night, a dispatcher is available normally only approximately 61% of the time. And in 2025, the average taxi pickup time was 37 minutes. And for a young person standing outside at night alone, that is not a minor
Just reference where you get your statistics from, see?
From the GAP.
Good.
I'm sorry, the GAP statistics that other people have been referring to. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And that's not simply a minor inconvenience. It could be a safety concern. And our goal this evening, with respect to the introduction of this legislation, is not to undermine the taxi industry, but in fact, this framework deliberately protects it. We've already heard from the honorable member that's presenting this bill some further statistics insofar as how this will continue to protect the taxi industry, insofar as the rideshare permits will remain limited to 150. Street hailing by rideshare drivers will not be permitted. Taxis will continue to be able to collect fares on the street as well as in the ramps that they traditionally serve. And more importantly, taxi operators will receive the first preference from the approved dispatch platform. And a rideshare driver will only be able to receive a request if that taxi does not accept the trip within a designated framework. Therein lies a particular benefit for the taxi drivers. In other words, this system, Mr. Speaker, I submit, prioritizes taxis first while ensuring that the passengers, especially our young adults that are home from school trying to get home, are not left stranded where service is unavailable. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, we've already built in some safeguards to help to protect the passengers. Every trip will be digitally recorded through the platform, which will create accountability and traceability. Only public service vehicle license operators will be permitted to provide the rides. The vehicles will be subjected to enhanced inspections, as well as the operators must display clear identification. In addition, all drivers will undergo criminal record checks as well as traffic offense record checks, and they must carry motor vehicle insurance that specifically includes the coverage for rideshare. And let us be clear, enforcement is important. And with respect to any breaches of this legislation, they could be subjected to a penalty of $10,000 upon summary conviction. This is about balance, Mr. Speaker. It is about protecting an important industry while also responding to the transportation reality that our community is facing today, particularly as it relates to our young people. Most importantly, Mr. Speaker, it's about safety. When our young people cannot get home in a reasonable time, we create unnecessary risk. And a modern, regulated ride-sharing framework helps to ensure that when someone needs a ride, especially late at night, they're not left stranded, and that they are safe and accountable and legal options are available. And for parents like me, this provides me with peace of mind. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Any other member wish to make a contribution? MP Simmons was up before you there, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before I get into the meat of my remarks, I would like to take an opportunity to make sure that our taxi industry is given the appreciation that it is due. And I think that I've been very, very beneficial for my family. My father drove taxi in the 70s to help build our house. And so many of my generation's fathers did that. And they contributed to the industry because of the love Bermudians have for the industry. And when we have our best drivers, I will say, Bermudians in general, when we have the best drivers, the best waiters, the best whatever, they are the best. not just Bermuda good, internationally good. And so I want to take a moment to commend the drivers who continue to carry the standard forward that we set the standard for the world so many decades ago. Now, Mr. Speaker, as many people are aware, I have reason to spend my nights once in a while in St. George's. And on those oft occasions I would spend my nights in St. George's, there would be, for many years, people from the hotel stranded at the bus stop. And I would often have to take people to Grotto Bay, to Tucker's Point, to wherever, because they could not get a ride after coming out and having a wonderful evening in St. George's. They couldn't get back to where they were. When I became tourism minister and spent a lot more of my nights in Somerset, I became very acquainted with the Cambridge Beaches issues that their guests were having there, the Pompano Beach, the issues their guests were having there, and the Southampton Princess, the issues their guests were having in traveling to the dockyard and being unable to get home. And so when I became the tourism minister, while transport did not fall under my remit, I came into contact frequently with taxi drivers who would be lobbying for this and lobbying for that. And I would say to them, fellas, as tourism minister, this is a problem I'm facing, and people are putting pressure on me to put pressure on the transport minister to do something. Could you give me a solution? Give me anything that I can bring forward so that we can make this work. I mean, I even talked about, look, pick 4 guys, 2 ends of the islands, have them be the on-call guy, and just cover those parts. But we never could get to a solution. And it was interesting because when there were those who said, well, you guys just need to enforce the regulations, I did a deep dive into it, and I looked at the regulations, and I've never driven a taxi, I've never owned a taxi. A lot of the regulations to me in 21st century Bermuda didn't make sense. So I started asking some of our best drivers, the ones I viewed as responsible, not, you want to say positive things about them. And I asked them, why aren't you guys following these? And then they explained to me the reasons. And the reasons made sense. I'm not going to quote them because they're anecdotal, but the reasons they gave made sense. And that really struck in my mind is that how can we look at the regulations governing the taxi industry where a lot of the things are perceived, if not in reality, no longer applicable. So if you look at the situation of a driver being required to be on the road 16 hours, I wouldn't trust myself to drive anybody after 16 hours on the road. Is this still applicable? When you have a scenario now where lending out your car to cover the hours that you're not on the road or not able is maybe more of a riskier proposition when you can't get the parts as quickly as you if something gets damaged. And so there are things that are considerations that have arisen that have made some of these things that I think need to be reexamined. But in the interim, I can speak for a friend of mine who works evenings, and she missed a bus, and she went on Hitch, and she could see all the cabs, but nobody would come, and ended up having to catch the first bus in the morning. So there's a problem here that it's all right to say delay, let's do this, let's do that. But I believe we should take 2 streams. I appreciate, and one of the things that enabled me to be able to be comfortable supporting this is that taxis come first, rideshare when needed. Taxis come first, rideshare when needed. And that is the thing that is, because in the gap, we can come up with any theory as to why there are gaps, but in the gap, it must be filled. Not just for our tourists, who will then be able to say that they had a great experience in St. George's or in Dockyard and then were able to get home safely, but for our workers who work on unsociable hours, for people who rely on being able to get home and sometimes just are not in a position to have to sleep at a bus stop all night because they couldn't get home or couldn't get a ride from family. So the whole proposition of taxis first, rideshare as needed, I can't stress that enough. And I think that with most legislation, there is always the power in the future to amend, to expand, to contract. But I think that we also should seriously look at, before we start enforcing laws from decades ago or regulations from decades ago, examining and working with our industry partners to make them relevant for today and enforceable for today's reality. Mr. Speaker, I will finish up with this point, that as we have seen over the years, the Bermudian spirit around tourism, there are less of us going into the industry. But I know from my time in working in industries, the ones who are there who have a passion for it continue to represent Bermuda as well. So I encourage all of us to encourage our industry partners in the taxi industry and hospitality to continue to carry the Bermuda flag high and represent us well. And I look forward to seeing the results of this legislation enabling people to be able to support the taxi industry when they are stretched to the limit. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP. Does any other member wish to make a contribution? Minister Lightman.
Good evening, Mr. Speaker. I rise this evening and I wanted to begin by sharing a quote, Mr. Speaker, if you would permit me to, which is found in the Daily. And it says, "We arrived on Monday evening on a flight from Westchester County. It was 9 p.m. on time, which wasn't a problem, but at the same time, there was another flight that arrived just a bit late. When we got out to pick up a taxi, there were no taxis and about 50 people waiting to get a ride. I called a local taxi operator, but they were in bed. And then I called the main line, and they did not know that taxis were needed. Fortunately, a very nice Bermudian took pity on us and drove us to our house, but felt terrible for the others because they were mainly tourists, with some with children who were stranded for God knows how long." Mr. Speaker, I thank you for allowing me to share that quote, but I think it provides foundation for the problem that we're seeking to solve for. We recognize that there have been years of challenges with persons seeking a transportation and they cannot. Everything has evolved, and we know that we are number one in some other areas of our economy, but this is an area which we are seeking to address and also evolve. And we're trying to do so through systematically implementing this legislation, which will be able to provide greater data, greater information to make better informed decisions. We heard tonight about some of the data points, and Mr. Speaker, if you allow me to reshare some of them, but they begin by telling us that 130,000 unanswered rides requested in 2024, 80,000 unanswered rides again in 2025, a 37-minute average estimated wait time and pickup time, 49% visitor satisfaction with taxis. These numbers and the data, Mr. Speaker, presents a compelling framework and foundation for a solution to be crafted. And I'm grateful for the Ministry of Tourism, Transport, Culture, and Sport and the team for advancing a framework to be able to assist in evolving this challenge. We know of tourists who arrive on island who are waiting for hours or waiting to receive access to transport, but yet we want to be able to advocate for and say that we have a tourist economy. We want to be able to say that we have a tourism product, and we know that transportation is a critical component of that tourism product. And so, Mr. Speaker, when we think about what this legislation is seeking to advance, it is solving a problem that we know has existed for a while. There have been previous administrations who have not sought to advance solutions, and they likewise have not sought to advance the enforcement that they are suggesting that we should do. But this is progress, and it is aligned to the record that this administration has successfully advanced. ShoreLink is another reference, 2 new ferries, for example. And so we are continuing on, Mr. Speaker, in our record of delivering and providing solutions, Mr. Speaker, to the problems that we have and we've heard from our community are needing to be addressed. One of my colleagues this evening, Mr. Speaker, shared about how it's not a silver bullet, and I want to echo in that sentiment because it is not, but it does provide a baseline for the challenge of access to rides, to be addressed. We have mothers who have to use transportation, particularly outside of their homes, or don't have transportation to get and drop their children off to school. I know of when I'm dropping my child off to school, particularly last year, there was a parent who dropped her child in a taxi every single day. And they did so because of the inability to access reliable transportation. It was off the bus route, but her need for access to rides was conditional on the availability of taxis because that was her preference. And so I think there is no one on this side that is seeking to disparage or create a undermining of the taxi industry, which is correctly why what we are advancing today through the rideshare prioritizes the taxi license holders first. I likewise seek to support and also share what some of my constituents have shared with me about their views on this rideshare app and legislation. Many of them said long overdue. Many of them said it's about time that the government or that someone addressed this long outstanding challenge because they too would like to see these changes addressed. I likewise did have a call from a constituent who had some questions, and the questions were around how to be able to ensure that their license was to be able to be prioritized. How would they ensure that their taxi license and the what they've worked for by way of their industry and their main way of providing additional revenue for their additional funds for their family would be supported. And they were comforted by the fact that this would be after the fact that license holders would not be available. And they were comforted by the fact that the rideshare was providing a level of redundancy for access, and it was not seeking to compete directly with the license holders at present. We know also, Mr. Speaker, that we have an industry of unregulated drivers. My colleague spoke about that this evening, about how he witnessed, outside of one of the major grocers, unlicensed, unregulated transportation providing access to fill the gap, Mr. Speaker. But this is a framework that would allow for us to not only get greater data, but also be able to regulate those currently unregulated transportation methods. Mr. Speaker, I think that what is also clear is that through the 150 permits that this legislation is seeking to have uncapped, it is allowing for the taxi license holders to be prioritized. It is also advocating for the seasonal hours to be able to address the peaks in our tourism schedules. It also is advancing for digital and cashless services, which we know in these times it can be challenging to have cash on hand. Taxi drivers have been the subject of robberies and the like, and so it is actually seeking to take us into the future. It is seeking to evolve an industry that has long not been evolved, and also provide a level of clarity and the very data that members in this House have requested. Mr. Speaker, I also was comforted knowing that the minister and the ministry responsible for tourism, transport, culture, and sport had conducted a series of consultation. They had engaged with the Chamber of Commerce. They had engaged with the BTOA. They had engaged with the Hotel Association. They had engaged with the Tourism Authority to ensure that the plans that they were seeking to advance were aligned to the very stakeholders that this industry has as representatives. And so who best to advise and inform legislation than the very stakeholders who day in and day out are engaging with both the need and the demand of those who need transportation in this country. As a minister responsible for Home Affairs, I also see it relevant to include the link to affordability. If a mother who needs transportation to get to her job, which she no longer can get her funds from, she cannot receive a tip, she cannot receive her earnings to be able to provide for her family, then that is a problem. We know that every dollar matters right now in this economy. And so for a family or a mother or a father who cannot have access to transportation to provide for their family, that becomes a problem, Mr. Speaker. And so this evening I am grateful, and I am in support of the legislation that is before us this evening because of the collective and also economic benefits that it brings to our country. Those who are also seeking a little bit more funds now have access and opportunity to have a rideshare permit, which could allow for them to earn a little bit more. Again, prioritizing the taxi license holders, but allowing for those who wish to enter the market an opportunity. So, Mr. Speaker, I wish to stand in support, recognizing the value and the importance of change, the importance of evolution, and what it will do in particular for our tourism sector. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Does any other member wish to make a contribution? Minister De Silva.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, they say that the worst decision you can make
is not making one. And we've heard, and we just heard it again, chirping across the floor, is a decision not to do it. Well, Mr. Speaker, and you heard the Honorable Member Fay, who continues to chirp,
That's not
saying-
had a personal conversation.
saying that we are putting the cart before the horse. Well, guess what, Mr. Speaker? You can call it what you like. What we're doing is we're making a decision. And as a former tourism and transport minister that met with 400 taxi drivers at Warwick Workmen's Club. And Mr. Speaker, just let me remind everyone that I opened up that meeting like this. And I said, listen, I know you all come out tonight because I said I'm going to issue 150 taxi permits. That's what got the attention. And what I told him is said, listen, I'm the minister. You guys are the taxi drivers. I want you to help me to help the people of this country and the visitors that come to this country to get around seamlessly as possible. That's what I want you to do. And Mr. Speaker, we were there for about an hour and a half. And I didn't say too much. It was all of them having the conversation between themselves. And where did we end up? Right back at the starting block. And you will know, Mr. Speaker, that I produced a green paper. Now, let's just be clear, because the Honorable Member Fay pointed out many things in that document. Well, for the listening public, I want to make it clear that a green paper is a government document that outlines problems and possible solutions, but does not set a policy.
It's a white paper which you haven't published.
It is an invite for feedback from citizens, organizations, and experts. That's what the green paper is, Mr. Speaker. That's what it was. And I think if everybody in this House is honest, they will know that that's exactly what a green paper attempts to do, whether it be in this industry or any other industry. Now, Mr. Speaker, we have to stop the nonsense when it comes to taxi drivers. We really do. We've all heard the stories from our tourists and our family members and friends. We've all heard their stories, whether it's coming out of restaurants, whether it's leaving the beaches, whether it's leaving town or St. George's late at night, or even after dinner. The hotels, you get the complaints every summer. You get it. The airport, we all know we've had family members and tourists who come in at the airport and there's no taxis there to take them. None. So what we are doing, Mr. Speaker, is, and I'll get around to enforcement in a minute. But when you have our tourists who give us feedback, and over 50% of our tourists are dissatisfied with the transportation in this country, we have a problem. Now, the honorable member can talk about putting the cart before the horse, but we are on the cusp of another tourist season. And the honorable member said, why couldn't you take another 6 months? Well, in 6 months' time, summer's over. We do not, this Minister of Transport, Minister Darrell, has said we're not going to put our tourists through another season of dissatisfaction. So I take my hat off to him for being the first tourism minister to be able to get this across the line. That's going to help our transportation industry. Now, let me say something. Mr. Speaker, now we heard the talk about 16 hours and taxi drivers, operating more than what they do. We've heard the complaints about the ride share from the other side. Well, you know what, Mr. Speaker? All the taxi drivers have to do is do their job. Because if they do their job, you know what's going to happen? The ride share is going to go away. Because who's going to pay $1,000 for a fee and pay $400 in payroll tax if they don't get any business? That means that the taxi drivers have done their job. And guess what we have done by implementing this? We're going to take care of our tourists because we are doing our job. See, Mr. Speaker? Now, the other side talked about enforcement. You might recall, Mr. Speaker, they were in government for about 4.5 years. Couldn't make the 5. But they were in government for 4.5 years. And the Honorable Member Fay even said he was the minister for a year. Well, what happened? I can't remember anything significant, if anything at all, happening during that 4.5 years. So we remain the same. It's a tough nut. Now, Mr. Speaker, I heard honorable members on that side speaking with a forked tongue tonight. Forked tongue. And if you look up the word of forked tongue,
be careful on how far you go down that road.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I can give you a couple of definitions of forked tongue if you like, just to be clear. Now, I'm reading this. I'm not saying this, Mr. Speaker. Forked tongue meaning could be lying or deceiving. Someone who speaks with a forked tongue could not be telling the truth. They could be saying conflicting things depending on the situation. Now, let's talk about that for a minute. Now, the Honorable Member Fay said, and I will quote.
Now, I'm going to caution you because how you use your description on the first few words
yes,
to describe it, you don't want to direct that to any member.
Oh, no, I'm not doing that at all. Not doing that at all, Mr. Speaker. Not doing that at all. But this is what the Honorable Member Fay said, and I will quote. We are taking the livelihood away from the taxi drivers. But then in the very next breath, he said, we need to be strong with enforcement. Take the taxi permits away. 1 minute he says, don't take their living away from them. Then the next minute he says, you need to enforce the laws. So what do? We take away 10 taxi permits, 20, 50, 100. How many permits would that honorable member like us to take away that will definitely affect their living, their right to earn a living? See, Mr. Speaker, we all know that's why we need to stop the nonsense in this House. We all know we've all had opportunities to make changes in the taxi industry, and we all know why we haven't done it. Okay? We have to be honest and stop the nonsense. Now we go. That's right. All of us.
Mr. Speaker, point of order. The member's been given a massive amount of latitude here. There are definitely more than just insinuations now. Speaking of forked tongues and lying, that is absolutely unparliamentary, and the member should cease immediately. It's outrageous.
I got you. I did caution you, member, when you
yes, you did.
Because of the fact that...
That was 10 minutes ago. You did, Mr. Speaker. I'm way past that.
Yeah. Don't challenge me now because you will find yourself out the door. Okay? Sit down while I'm talking, please. Okay? Let's not let this turn get out of hand because I will deal with it immediately. We don't want that tonight. When you get on your feet again, just make sure you take a different tack on how you present the rest of your debate tonight. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, thank you. As I said, this change in legislation will not take away the livelihood of taxi drivers, as the honorable member said. And what we will not do is bring about enforcement so that we take away 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 permits from taxi drivers. One thing this minister will do, just as he's brought this legislation change here tonight, I know that minister, enforcement is on his radar. And I can assure you, Minister Darrow will bring it. And you talk about cart before the horse. What he's doing, Mr. Speaker, with this legislation, we are on the verge of another tourist season. And the statistics, and I hope now that enough data has been put out on the floor tonight by members on this side, so that members on that side can understand and agree and support why this change is needed and on behalf of our people and our tourists. Not easy, Mr. Speaker. You've been around a long time, longer than any one of us here. So you've heard all the debates on taxis and transportation for our people and our tourists. And I will finish where I started, Mr. Speaker. And the worst decision that we can make is not making one. And we're going to make one tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Is there any other member? MP Opposition Leader, MP Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, we've heard several people tonight talk about what people personally are going through when they're dealing with taxis, what tourists are dealing with. I think we can all identify that problem, that there is seeming to be a lack of taxis available for certain times of the day, at the airport. But Mr. Speaker, this isn't a rideshare problem. This isn't the opposition being against progress, technology. This is about accountability and enforcement. Because we've heard members act as if they're not the ones that are responsible for making sure that the enforcement is going to happen. Mr. Speaker, we have problems on our roads right now. There are laws in place. But the behavior is out of control. So, Mr. Speaker, we have an issue where there are supposed to be a certain number of taxis that are on the road. Those taxis are supposed to be on the road for a certain amount of time, regardless of whether that has to be changed. It hasn't been changed. So you have to enforce the rules that are there, which means you're going to have enough officers to be able to do that. And the Deputy Premier just made mention that they wouldn't want to get rid of anybody's license. But Mr. Speaker, if members within the taxi industry are not behaving in the way that they should be, because in Bermuda, taxis were known as ambassadors of our country. That's the behavior that we should have an expectation of. We're talking about the tourist industry. If we had 600 taxis operating the way they're supposed to be operating, with ambassadors driving them, and at that point we saw a gap, rideshare makes sense. But Mr. Speaker, we don't know whether all of those taxis are operating the way they're supposed to. Because, Mr. Speaker, there are legislation that says the dispatchers are supposed to give data to TCD. My first question, are they providing that data? If they are not providing that data, what does the legislation say should happen to the dispatcher who's not providing the data? enforcement. See where the weakness comes? So when you add more and you haven't actually enforced the rules that you have in place today, how are you going to expect to have to enforce on the extra that you've added? Because if you don't fix the original problem, nothing changes. Mr. Speaker, we've heard people talk about what happens at the airport. So the taxis are not there at the airport, but rideshare can't sit in a queue. So how do we actually solve that problem? Mr. Speaker, we also heard a story that somebody's accepted a call, a taxi's accepted a call, but it's taken 37 minutes for that taxi to get there. Well, that means that they accepted it. Well, if a taxi accepted it under rideshare can't pick that call up because it's already been picked up by a taxi. We have to fix the problem. We can't duck it. If the problem is that the taxi industry is not behaving the way they're supposed to.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. Point of order, Mr. Speaker. I believe that the honorable opposition leader is unintentionally maybe misleading the House. The stat and the data about the 37 minutes means that when a person first initiated a call for a taxi, they may have had to call multiple times, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe that the honorable opposition leader is unintentionally misleading the House. It is from the time, from whatever happens, to put it into context, rather they had to call. That's how you get the stat of 80,000 unanswered calls. Because the individual may stand there and call multiple times in a 10-minute span. So the 37 minutes is from the time that I first initiate and say, I need a taxi. It doesn't mean that the taxi that picked up took 37 minutes to get there. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So, Mr. Speaker, I hear the explanation that just came from the minister, but I'll use personal because I was actually repeating based off of what came from another member, but I'm going to say that there are times that I have called for a taxi with an expectation that the taxi was going to be there at 6 o'clock. That means I've already booked it. 6 o'clock comes, they're not there. Then you make that second call that the minister's referring to. The problem is we have to have a way to enforce the behavior of the taxi industry. We can't ignore it. Because, Mr. Speaker, we vet the taxi drivers. We're talking about vetting the people that are going to be in rideshare. But we all have also heard members of our public talk about taxi drivers driving intoxicated, behavior of taxi drivers, complaints coming because of the taxi industry. These are things that are happening today before we add this. And the issue is, when we are talking about how taxi members who have paid hard-earned money to get that taxi license are going to be impacted. Remember, there are lots of taxi drivers who work really hard, who continue to be that ambassador for the country, who paid $100,000 for that license. And now they're competing against somebody $1,000. See, this is where the difference comes. Because if there's 600,
Point of order, Mr. Speaker, point of order. Point of order. The honorable member is again misleading the House. The numbers of which he may speak of may be of a friend that he knows who may have paid over $100,000 for a taxi medallion. There are individuals that have taxi permits, Mr. Speaker, that have had them for over 50 years that didn't pay anything close to $100,000. In fact, Mr. Speaker, the last time that TCD actually sold taxi permits, the last price that was on a taxi permit from TCD was actually $50,000. So, Mr. Speaker, while the honorable opposition leader may talk about $100,000, that is what the market has set, not what it was. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So, Mr. Speaker, thank you for the minister, because if it's 50,000 compared to 1,000, I'm pretty sure that's still a problem.
Yeah, still a problem.
So it doesn't change what I was saying.
Nope.
The issue is accountability within the industry. This isn't being against progress and technology, because the truth is that same progress and technology should be happening in the taxi industry. The same concept of the cashless payments and credit cards, that should be happening in the taxi industry. Knowing where all these taxis are at all times so that we know whether people are not picking up a certain ride. We should have that ability today. And the truth is, if that is what you were doing first, and then you were able to identify this is where this problem is, and now the ride share will fix that particular problem, then it makes sense. But to add the ride share when you actually are not holding the industry accountable just adds more complication to the problem. So this idea that not enforcing is okay doesn't work. We see the results of it. And we all have not only heard the stories, we live the stories. We've all been to a restaurant and tried to get a taxi and we're not able to get a taxi, and the frustration. Many of us have also taken tourists to a hotel because no taxi was coming.
So what's enforcement look like to you?
The law already tells you what you're supposed to have, and this is the problem. So do you have 600 working taxis available? Can the minister tell us that? Can the minister tell us that we actually have the 600 operating the way they're supposed to be operating, and if they're supposed to be on the road for 16 hours, that's happening? Because the feedback that you also receive from the taxi industry is so many of them are afraid of giving their car to somebody else to meet the 16 hours because they can't trust the behavior of the driver they're going to hand it off to. And Mr. Speaker, the reason I make that point is because moving to rideshare is part of the gig economy, right? Those are the changes that happen. But I'm going to mention the gig economy that happens now with people picking up and delivering food. And we've seen the behavior of those riders on our roads. Everybody here has seen it. And just remember, if we are not policing the taxi industry the way we should, the ambassadors, you're now giving this to somebody who's just making a hustle from one spot to the other. We've had ministers stand up here and talk about the fact that we have people that are already working illegally outside of the supermarket and all other areas. You don't think those people actually want to get regulated, pay the $1,000, because they're actually making hustle money now. They're not paying the $1,000, they're not getting insurance, they're not going to do any of those things. That's not changing anything. So why would they want to pay the $1,000, the insurance, and all the rest of it? Because trust me, this has to be about when we stand here and we put policies and legislation in place, we also have to make sure that it's being enforced. Otherwise, we are wasting the time here. You can't, why spend the time to put in a policy that says that if the dispatcher doesn't give the data, X happens, and then you never do it, and then you don't have the data, and now you're making a decision based off of the fact that you don't have the data, and now you're going to be able to collect data because you've got a ride share that's going to give you the data. That's what we're hearing today. It doesn't even make sense. Do the job that you already have. Collect the data you should already be collecting. That gives you the ability to make proper decisions when you come to this house. That's where we need to be. Mr. Speaker, this can't just be words about what we're doing in our community. If we really want to make this work, we have to enforce the rules. And if that means that certain taxi drivers should no longer be in the position to be a taxi driver, that has to happen. And if that means that we need to find new people that want to have a license, to our entrepreneurs that want to be ambassadors of our country, to pick up our tourists when they need to be picked up, to pick up our seniors when they need to be picked up, then that's what should happen. You hear them? Fired and unemployed. Mr. Speaker, if people are breaking the laws, there are consequences for it. When I say enforcement, why have the rule if you're not going to enforce it? Get rid of the rule. Not only our people need to get taken from place to place, they need to know that it's happening safely. They need to know that this system is working for them. So don't stand here and talk about policies that you're not going to enforce. This has to be about putting legislation forward and then seeing the regulations that you are going to back up with enforcement. And if that means that you actually have to hire more people to go out and do the work to enforce it, then that's what you have to do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Does anyone up? MP Simmons. Here we go. MP Simmons.
Good evening, Mr. Speaker, and good evening, colleagues. The hour is late.
Yes, it is.
Mr. Speaker, I've listened to colleagues on this matter. I have spent, and I think colleagues have spent, an enormous amount of time looking into the ride share and discussing the way forward and what we should do. And I admit, Mr. Speaker, that up until as early as yesterday, I somewhat struggled with this particular amendment, this particular bill, and moving forward therein. Mr. Speaker, it is quite evident by what has been said tonight by colleagues that the minister, the department, and the ministry are now aware very clearly on what has to be done once this bill is passed and move forward, what has to be done in the particular as it relates to taxis, as it relates to the industry, and how we need to move this forward to make sure that there is both enforcement and that we do justice to what the discussion has been here on the floor of this House. Mr. Speaker, we can't ignore the elephant in the room, and that is that our industry, as it relates to the taxi industry, has elements that are broken. Those elements need to be fixed. Those elements need to be addressed, and the sooner we do so, the better. But that does not necessarily mean that this particular bill should be set aside tonight for further review and investigation, Mr. Speaker, primarily because let's say the minister decides tonight and says, I'm going to withdraw the bill. What happens then? No. What happens then? The industry that we speak about in 2026 that needs address as it relates, and I'll tell you the reason why this is close to me, that needs an address specifically is the hour by which this particular bill addresses. I realize that it is in its impurity of the industry. Individuals within this House and throughout Bermuda are dissatisfied with the taxi industry. I have had to, in my capacity in hospitality, I have had to reach into my call center, Mr. Speaker, and create opportunity for my guests to be able to make their appointments, to be able to be on time for dinner, on time for the airport, on time for the things that they need to do, because there was a problem and there was a gap in service in the industry. Mr. Speaker, I've had to do that, but I realize and I recognize that there is a problem in the industry, but that our government is moving to, at the very least, solve that particular problem. Mr. Speaker, as it relates to the hour that this new bill speaks to, that particular time frame be spoken in this House tonight is where the problems occur. That is the one that is being addressed. That is where we sit today in this House. And so therefore, Mr. Speaker, I moved closer to agreeing with colleagues and saying, because I was leading up to it, I must say, I was struggling. Because I realized that it is easy for us to overlook. And I listened to the opposition leader just now, and I think he speaks as it relates to the taxi drivers and as it relates to the number of drivers in the industry who are absent in the full 16. I recognize that there has to be an adjustment made, and I think the minister and the ministry heard that. I think they also heard tonight that enforcement of the regs that we do feel apply must be done in the industry for it to improve. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I strongly believe that this government is moving in the right direction as it relates to addressing those times and addressing the issues of the day. I believe that the government is achieving just that. However, I'll repeat it. I believe that the government recognizes what's been said tonight, what's been said throughout Bermuda, and will make the necessary adjustment. Mr. Speaker, we have to understand, and it will be an easy fix for us to say that all taxi drivers must do the 16. We know the nuances of taxi drivers who say they don't wish to have their taxi. They have done their shift already, and they don't particularly want their taxis to be used. We've got all that, and we've said that tonight. That particular part of the industry is understood. That particular one, I think we've got. But as it relates to the number of taxis, I do believe that this ride share will solve that as it relates to where the actual regs and regulations and where the actual bill is centered. Mr. Speaker, I believe that we need to see the industry for just what it is. For quite some time in Bermuda and over time, those taxi drivers were the very staple of their families. They provided income that made those families survive. They worked when they had to work, and then they were off. I believe that we have to understand the value that they've brought, the respect that they have in the community, and also understand that we have to work with them going forward. And I don't believe that this particular bill removes the opportunity for them to continue to exist. And so I don't agree with the opposition on the fact that this could bring about the extinction of the taxi industry. I don't think so, in my humble opinion. I do believe that the ministry, I would think, and the department will make some adjustments going forward that will benefit the industry, but will also bring about the coverage as the lapses in coverage are identified. And so I believe that, I beg to differ from the honorable member. I do believe there was a feeling that, it was stated earlier that it was stated earlier on, it will bring about the extinction of the taxi industry. And I don't think that that is a fair assessment of what this brings. On the other point I wish to make tonight, Mr. Speaker, is that as a government, we must begin the process of developing more of a relationship with our stakeholders. I recognize that the minister has stated on this floor of this House and to us as a caucus, he's made it clear that I've gone out, I've chatted, I've talked, we've had the discussions. But Mr. Speaker, we must never grow tired of meeting with the industry, of talking with the industry, and getting the information that we require to get the job done. And so I believe that we should continue to have that relationship, to develop that relationship, and to make that relationship work. I think that there are industries throughout Bermuda, Mr. Speaker, if I may, that are not happy at all. And what I heard tonight on the floor of the House is a whole lot of what we believe and feelings of what we think is taking place, but the facts don't bear out quite like that. Because if I had taken what I felt this week and the week before that, I would not have voted for this bill in the affirmative. I would not have wanted to vote for this bill in the affirmative. But after talking, after listening, and after hearing what this is all about, reading the bill for myself, I recognize as a member of this House that my responsibilities lie in making sure that we begin the process of moving the country forward by producing bills like this and moving things in the proper way and in the right fashion. Mr. Speaker, I think we need to steer away from misleading the public and allowing the public to be out there with all kinds of things that are said that are not necessarily true. I know that we are governed many times by what people say, and I think that this is the case and that's the case, and we need to remove personalities out of it. Sometimes, and I repeat, Mr. Speaker, or I'll state this, what I had to determine was whether or not this was good law, whether or not this made sense. And once I went through the law, once I went through it in its writing, I realized that it had value and that it could improve my circumstances in the hospitality where I serve, and that it would help me in those hours to be able to have coverage for my guests and to make sure that I am covered. So it has satisfied that. I'm encouraged that I do believe that the minister has heard, his department and his staff have heard the discord and the displeasure in this House as it relates to the way that enforcement has been done and the way that we conduct our business. But I want to make sure that we're clear on a lot of things. We are politicians. We represent constituencies. We represent voters in this House. And so we have a responsibility to address their issues and to understand the situations that they're in, and that there are times when they cannot be blamed entirely for the situations for which they have been allowed to be in. And so, Mr. Speaker, I wish to conclude on this note that as far as I'm concerned, I do believe that the concerns that I had and the concerns that those I've spoken to surrounding this matter have been met. But I also believe, and I must caution our government, I must caution first, on ignoring the public and ignoring what the people feel, which I don't think we're doing in this case, but making sure that we are doing the things, saying the things, and being the things that are assigned and allowed to them. Then from there, Mr. Speaker, it is my hope that we take the advice and that we do make further amendments and that we move it along in the way that it should be. I think that this is good, a good bill. It isn't everything for everyone. It doesn't satisfy everything, and it certainly doesn't satisfy the concerns that individuals have raised in this House, which is outside of the remit of the bill, but I don't necessarily feel that the bill should be completely thrown out or rewritten. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. MP Terrell, would you like your time on the floor?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on the Motorcar Ride Sharing Amendment Act 2026. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to be very brief in my weigh-in because most of the speakers ahead of me have said everything that I would have liked to have said. But I have 4 bullet points that I want to, so you can count as I go along. I have 4 bullet points. And the first thing I want to do is declare my interest. I am the chairman of the Public Service Vehicle Licensing Board, so I'm putting that out there right now. So I am certainly supporting the minister on this bill because I think it's a step in the right direction. I say a step in the right direction. And the 4 bullet points that I certainly want to leave is that we are protecting the livelihood of taxi drivers. We're not doing anything to do away with the taxi drivers. I do not think that this is going to kill the business of the taxi drivers. My second bullet point, it is to enhance the service to the customer, the important person in this equation that we're talking about. We've heard the stories of people saying how they've been left and that sort of thing, so I don't need to go into that. So this bill, in my opinion, certainly is enhancing the service to the customer. My third point, it is seasonal and limited hours that we're offering ride sharing. I think that's an important point. That's the point that I certainly want to get over. I'm not going to speak to it much more than that. And my fourth point, I will say, is that, yes, we have fallen short. Previous governments have fallen short as well. Here we are. And no disrespect to any previous minister, because some of you may not remember that I spent 3 months as Minister of Transport. So I just want to put that out there. So it's no disrespect. It's no disrespect to anyone. But what I want to say, Mr. Speaker, is that this minister is certainly going to lead the charge in improving the transport industry publicly. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. MP Swan, would you like a time on the floor?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. No, just ever so briefly, Mr. Speaker, and I declare my interest. I've spent 55 years in the hospitality industry, and I do remember I wasn't around in 1951 when this Motor Car Act was introduced, but I do remember in the 60s when my Uncle Deli Hall and had several taxis in the yard up in Rose Hill, and used to repair them, and he owned a few. And I do remember when there were certain persons, when the Motor Car Act was in its early years, there were persons who had multiple ownerships of cars, and so maintaining the 16 hours was operated from a business standpoint of view, because you had drivers that worked for persons who owned multiple cars, just like some people own multiple houses, some people own multiple cars. And time has evolved. Where is it evolved? Where persons, and I declare another, my late father, after he retired from the Bermuda Police Service for many years, was a taxi owner, and many other taxi owners, they cut their cloth according to their personal likes and dislikes. And taxi ownership has changed from those early days of the Cheese Rays and the Benny Sousas and the Deli Halls and the others around this country. And you know, one thing about this Rideshare Amendment Act that speaks to digital. Did somebody help me? Digitalization. Just break it down a little bit. Is that, you know, and I just went to my app and I went to Uber and I said, listen, I've got to go. Hopefully I can catch that private jet going out tonight, and I can go to Newark, and maybe I can get a taxi. Well, I go to my Uber and I tell them I want to get there early to the golf course, and I'm going to sleep in the parking lot, and there it goes. It's $30. It's there. You know, during COVID. You had to pre-register to come into Bermuda, and persons did that. I always say that that might be an option for people to pre-book prior to getting in Bermuda, to save themselves from having any disappointments on the other end. I spend a lot of time around the taxi industry myself, walking around areas where they are, and being in hotels, and know the experience that some of our members who also work in the hotel, two sitting right in front of me, member Scott and member Scott and member Scott Simmons. Both of them work in the hotel industry, and like myself, know what it's like to have guests coming out of restaurants after a wonderful night and can't get home and can't get back to their place. It's very frustrating. And like many of us have taken people home. I made some of my best friends drive them from St. George's to Sonesta Beach many years ago, and making friends and chatting them up. But it's a very, very inconvenient situation. I know that the Minister of Tourism gets up and down this country and sees any number of people, and he, like any of us, get confronted with persons. But I'm going to tell you this, right? You know what's going to happen in 2026? There are persons on the other side who are making hay on stuff that didn't really want Princess the way we were able to make sure that there is a Princess opening in 2026. There's going to be a need for a lot more taxis. And we don't have the time to sit on our hands. The minister has come up with something that's going to address the immediate needs of this country. Come April, you know what's going to happen? We're going to have cruise ships. Hopefully, I pray there's not any hurricanes this year, and it's right along through the season. We're going to have a lot of people going to the beaches and around the country, going to the golf courses and the like. The demand for transportation around this island is going to increase exponentially within a few weeks' time, because we're in March now. And by the end of this month, when the cruise ships start rolling in, the rubber will hit the road in real time. And you know what? When cruise ships come and do surveys on communities, they look at things such as transportation as to whether or not they rate whether or not they're going to bring a ship back to an area. We certainly would like to have more visitations to St. George, but we would get looked at favorably. You heard someone make a disparaging remark when they said, and they're in the hospitality industry, it's even tougher when persons are trying to find transportation in St. George. And we've seen hotels have to move towards doing what? Getting their own transportation and having them parked outside of restaurants and the like sometimes. Right? I don't hear anybody complaining about that because it's necessary given the circumstances. And you know, Member Tyrrell that spoke before me, the chairman of the Public Service Licensing Board said something very important. It's seasonal. And it could only be seasonal for this year if it's deemed that someone comes along and says, "Listen, I'm gonna be the cheese Ray and the Benny Sue's of 2027, and I'm gonna buy up about 10 or 12, and I'm gonna start running them myself. I'm gonna make sure that when Zane stops his shift at 8, that Swan is coming on at 8:15 and his running, and then Swanee puts down that cab, and then he takes it to so and so, and every week it goes in and gets service and the like. We don't have people running taxis like that in Bermuda anymore, but they used to. And let's be honest, we have PSVs, private service vehicles doing public service. Persons that will have a cab, and it's also privately situation. Let's be real. But let me tell you something. We care and protect the working class persons, the tradesmen of this country. Those are the shoulders we stand on. But we do have to make sure that we are not doing a disservice to the country by not having the service that's required in 5 weeks' time. 4 weeks' time, and the cruise ships start coming in earnest up in Dockyard and around. And we've got to get these people around the island. So I'm prepared to support the minister because I know the minister is very much in tune that this country needs to be ticking in transportation with immediate effect. And I hear the punitive turn in person's voice. I hear the punitive turn. Take that nut and crack it. Not doing that. This particular legislation is allowing persons who want to get into this ride share to have a piece of pie only if taxis are not available. And I think that does a good service for the customer of this country, whether or not it be a local or a visitor. And if we are really and truly in the hospitality business for both locals and visitors and providing service, we've got to do it with immediate effect and put them first. And let me invite anybody over there. Go and ask the hotel owners and the operators and the managers and of different departments that deal with people what they are saying. What are they saying? What are people saying to them? They're not up in arms about this because they know that they've tasked the minister, and as a consequence, the minister is responding accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, member. Is any other MP candidate?
I'm just going to ask some questions, Mr. Speaker. That's
Ask some
all.
questions.
No need
Go
for me
ahead.
to move any needle here tonight. I think that our leader has put our position well in how we feel about this particular bill. I don't envy the minister's position that he is in after hearing 80,000 unanswered calls. And I will repeat what everyone has said. We do have a challenge. What has been made very clear tonight is that for us as the OBA, it is important that some form of policing happens. We have minibuses, we've got limos, we've got buses, we've got ferries, we've got the ride share coming up now, we've got Hitch and other organizations that was just mentioned, we've got taxis, we've got gypsy taxis, and the list is getting longer and longer to resolve the challenge of meeting the needs of not just our people, but also the needs of our tourist industry. So my questions are, and I'm hoping that we can get some answers here, is this going to be a seasonal thing? After listening to the last speaker from constituency number 2 speak, the Honorable Swan, are we looking at this to be a seasonal thing? I kind of read through the bill in an understanding that hopefully this was going to help out the local market in some way or some form. And what is the rate? I don't know. Is the rate going to be the same as the taxi rate fares? So, well, it's not in the bill. We've been going through it here. Show me where it is. Find it for me. Yeah, find it for me. Yeah, find it for me. What the rate is. And then, of course, I'm trying to understand the logistics of this. So if, in fact, we only have 5 taxis at the airport, are they allowed to queue up as well, the rideshare drivers? Will they be able to? And at Dockyard? And at Dockyard, if we have challenges there, will they be able to queue at the? So I'm hearing a lot of talk about helping out the tourists and at these different places, but if they can't queue up, what are we doing here with this? So there's so many, there are more unanswered questions to this here. If they can't queue up at Dockyard to help out the thousands of people that are up there, and if they can't queue up at the airport, then we're not resolving some of the issues that I've heard from the government speakers saying that we're going to resolve this issue. So I'm hoping to hear more about how that, I want to hear more about how that's going to work, right? So, yes.
Let him talk. Let the member talk to me.
I haven't said anything controversial, but of course, the suggestion that we're not talking about Mr. and Mrs. Jones or Mr. Smith as if some of us don't identify with certain communities. Is that what we're suggesting here? I hope that the government is not suggesting that. I hope that they're not suggesting that, because I do have a peace of mind to give them if they think that. And maybe I'll use up all of my 30 minutes to just get that point across. That they are not the only ones that represent Bermuda and all sectors of Bermuda. So where am I going? I'm going where your minister just tried to go. That's where I'm going. But I won't go there because it's not necessary. I want some answers to the questions I asked. And it doesn't sound as if we're resolving the line or the lack of taxis at the airport. It doesn't sound like we're resolving the issues that Dockyard is having when all of the wonderful cruise ships come in. And maybe what we should be looking at is if we know that we're saying we have 600 plus taxis licensed. Maybe we should be looking at how we can vary the license to ensure that these taxis are on the road more. So maybe if they're driving at night, there's a better license for taxi drivers than what they have now, a reduction of it, to get more taxis on the road overnight so we don't have the atrocities that some of us have talked about, where we can't get a taxi. I'm in the position of that right now. My engine blew in my car, so I'm like, oh man, okay, I got to at least get my wife to work on time, you know, and I had to plan. So I had to call a service and say, listen, can you pick us up at 8 o'clock every morning? Planning ahead of time. Now, what does concern me is that you can plan ahead of time, but again, as we've heard, 80,000 calls. Something has to happen, I'm admitting. Something does have to happen. But I'm feeling like there's other unanswered questions with all of these services that we already have, including gypsy cabs that are out there. They're eating away at the taxi service as well, and maybe they're upset about that. So we should be policing this thing. It would be nice to have some admittance that, listen, we need to be enforcing some of the rules and regulations, the laws that we have in place to ensure that we're protecting the taxi industry in and of itself. Because if we are not addressing that, and I have heard nothing to suggest that we're going to be addressing this in any formative way, then we continue to kick the can down the road, and we'll add something else, and we'll add something else to try and fill the gap, when what we need to be doing is ensuring that our roads have the services available for our people and for our tourists alike. So is this seasonal? Is the rate going to be exactly the same? Now, I know for locals, I will say this. One of the challenges, and it's not just gypsy cabs out there as well. There's other services out in town and some of the other areas, back of town, if you want to call it that, that have a well-established service. You make one call, and I'm probably ratting them out, but they're well organized. You ain't got to get a gypsy cab. They'll come and pick you up and bring you right home to your house. So there's a lot of that going on right now. So, yeah, I know what's going on out there with it. And having owned a taxi myself, I know the challenges with having it. I saw it because it's too challenging out there to get people on the road for 16 hours. So I know there are challenges. So maybe we need to start looking at, we can get more taxi licenses, give them out, and vary the taxi license so that we can cover certain times that might help. I don't know if that's a solution or not, but it is a creative way of looking at it, because we can't get the taxis out there for 16 hours. We know that. So maybe we need to incentivize the industry. We've already tried to incentivize it by giving them lower taxes. Lower taxes. It hasn't worked. It's just not working. And we need to face up to the fact, all of us, all 36 of us, it's not working. And the taxi industry wants to survive. They're telling us to police them. Then let's do it. You say you want it done? Did they say it to you, Minister? I don't know, that they want to be policed. We certainly heard it in the several meetings that we've heard. So let's do it. Let's tighten up the reins. If you want to go ahead, like most of us have said, we agree with ride sharing that, maybe this is a way forward, but it certainly is not going to resolve the issues that I heard from both sides of the House. Most of the issues that I heard from both sides of the House, I'm not sure, since we can't even police the industry that we have now, adding rideshare, how are we going to police that? Because there are going to be some unintended consequences by adding this to it. I hope we all understand things unforeseen that we probably didn't even think of that's going to take place. So let's tighten up the reins, and I hope we can get some answers to those questions. And that's all, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Any other honorable member wish to make a contribution? None? Premier?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Are you going to start a clock for me? I'll do my best not to take 30 minutes.
I know you ain't going to use your 30 minutes.
Oh, we'll see, but it's too late. All right. So, Mr. Speaker, as I started during my intervention. It is clear to, I think, everyone in the country that I have a declarable interest on this particular matter. As my register of interest says, I am a shareholder of Hitch Limited, and as I have said, since I've been in office, I have not taken an active role, resigned my director positions, and I'm not involved with the day-to-day activities or anything else regarding that. Now, here's the thing, Mr. Speaker. Sorry? The sad reality of the public debate around this is that this debate is more about what has taken place or what I did as a private citizen before I came to office, and not about the policy or the problem that we are trying to solve. I will say it again. The sad reality of the public debate around this particular issue is more around the interests of which I just declared than the policy of which we are trying to debate. The public debate, not the one in here.
Let me just make it clear from here. You stressed the public debate, not the debate here tonight.
Not the one in here, no.
Okay,
the public debate.
As long as you clear that.
Yes,
Okay.
not the one in here.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay.
It has not been about the stranded residents in Taurus. It has not been about the fact that we have an issue in this country providing transportation to tourists and residents during peak times in our holiday season. That is a reality and a fact. And with the greatest respect to the opposition, none of the solutions of which they have proposed will work to fix that problem. We all know the difficulty. I'll get to your points later. We all know the difficulty of trying to tell someone who owns a vehicle that you must hire someone else. The honorable member just took his seat and said he sold his taxi because he can't find people. To find someone else to drive something, and then when they get in an accident, then the taxi's off the road and all the rest. We know the difficulties there. So let's just park that to the side. Because the reality is that the job of a government is to solve problems. I remember an interview that I did a few years ago, and I said that if I didn't, with my friends, decide to launch an app in 2015, this rideshare problem would have long fix. Again, the public debate focuses on the wrong issues. It doesn't focus on the policy and the problem that we are trying to solve. As a tourism destination, we cannot be a place where people cannot get from A to B. We cannot be a jurisdiction where we have persons who we invite into our country to work and all the rest, expect certain things and can't get to dinner, all the rest. We have all heard the stories. I have told the stories where I will go to an event, I will see someone, and I will see people with that look on their face at the hotel door. And I know exactly what that look is. That look is they had dinner reservations they can't get. I remember one time I went to a hotel and I told my driver, take them to where they are going, please, so they can get to their dinner. The reason why I made that decision in 2015, Mr. Speaker, when I made the decision in 2015, Mr. Speaker, is I remember I was staying in the constituency 32, the honorable member Scott Simmons. I was having a honeymoon weekend, not a honeymoon weekend, anniversary weekend with my wife at Green's Guest House. We went to Cambridge Beaches. Guess what? Couldn't get back for our post-honeymoon or post-dinner anniversary activities. Couldn't get back. Yes, couldn't get back. Stuck in stranded. Ruined my plans.
Be careful. No.
But this is the reality, Mr. Speaker. This is faced by people throughout this country. And the question is, what are you going to do about it? Now, I understand that there's politics at play here. I understand that it is a safe move to say, let's say oppose. But what is the plan to fix? And I'm sorry, Leader of the Opposition.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. Order. The honorable member is misleading the House. He's saying that oppose oppose, oppose, oppose. This is not about opposing. This, as I've already said, is about putting good legislation forward. If we cannot get on our feet, and we have made I just stood up and made some suggestions. And for the premier to get on his feet to say that we haven't made any suggestions is foolhardy at best. It's foolhardy.
Mr. Speaker, with the greatest of respect to the Honorable former Premier, that's not what I said. I was addressing the opposition leader. I said, I'll get to your questions in a little bit. Just calm down. And I'm sure the minister will do that. Just listen for a bit, Craig. So here we go. No. There's a political dimension to this. We're all politicians here. We get it. We recognize. We understand it.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order.
The Premier is suggesting that we are playing politics with a bill.
I absolutely am.
Yes, and he is exercising the very delusion that his honorable member spoke of earlier. We are here for good legislation, so let's stay on that line and length.
Haven't even started talking about the legislation yet, Mr. Speaker.
Just continue on the
I'm good. I'm good, Mr. Speaker. So here we go, Mr. Speaker. So here we go, Mr. Speaker. Let's be clear what we are talking about. Because the honorable members on that side kept making references to Uber, and the first two speakers on that side. We are not talking about Uber, which is...
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. The Honorable Premier is misleading the House. No one all evening has mentioned UBER.
Mr. Speaker, it is clear they are not listening to their own members when their own members speak. And it is clear that I have struck a nerve. So let me be clear, Mr. Speaker, as I'm going to talk about this. We are not talking about Uber, which is unregulated, as some people have said. A key point and a key difference. We are talking about supplementing the existing taxi service to assist in providing additional lift during peak times. That is what we are talking about. We have unregulated situations and we have regulated situations. And that is what we are talking about with this particular piece of legislation. And Mr. Speaker, it is important to make the distinction, because the public debate will focus on things like Uber, like and the impacts of what it has had in other jurisdictions, which is the exact opposite of what we are trying to have happen here. The thought that a government would bring forward legislation to decimate an industry that so many of our constituents and so many of our families and so many people rely on is a nonsense. It is a nonsense. But it is easy for headlines for those who may want to rally persons and feelings around this. We all know what happened in the run-up to the by-election before the honorable opposition leader won his seat back. You know, we were talking about rideshare, and they got everyone out all ready to go. We get it. It's politics. It's the same thing that we did when we were in opposition, and the honorable member who was the Minister of Transport bought a mini-car bill. We got it. But let's talk about how we fix the problem. And the problem is that there is not enough transportation during peak times during our summer season. We all know that, and we can all accept that. And so, Mr. Speaker, that is why I've said the statements that I've said about the industry's decimation ring hollow. And that is why the statement also about lack of consultation rings hollow. Because this has been going on since this honorable member was a minister, since the whip was a minister, since Lawrence was a minister. It has been going on for a while. There have been numerous statements on this, and it has continued to evolve to try to strike the right balance, to try to get there. When this was first announced, the criticism and complaints were correct, because it was never the policy of the government to ensure that taxis were given first preference and rideshare was only given if taxis did not respond. That was not what happened when it first announced. So it is important to recognize that through the consultative process and the meetings, we have come up with something what we think strikes that balance, Mr. Speaker, and that in of itself is important. So MP Jamal Simmons said it best when he says taxi first, rideshare when needed, and others have made the point, such as the deputy premier and the minister. If taxis are there really and willing to pick people up, then rideshare will never take off. It will never take off. But this, Mr. Speaker, is the challenge that we have. We know it is the case. And so we want to support our existing industries, but we want to fix those problems. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to give you a little bit of history. Because there is no worse feeling, at least for me. It was pretty bad. And I will share, some people may have heard it if they listen on the radio, and I'll take a little bit of time. I will share, Mr. Speaker, what happened the first time I used Uber. It's a story. Because for people who went to school in Washington, D.C. or other places, like New York, they will know how hard it was for a black man to get a taxi. Yes. And I remember the indignity of myself in university having to find the nearest white person to ask them to hail a taxi for me because I needed to get to where I was going. And that is the reality of many stories of persons. Now, this doesn't have much to do with this debate, but I'm setting a context here, Mr. Speaker. Because I remember in 2010, when I had gone to D.C. on a trip, and I was trying to get to a meeting, and I messaged the person who I was going to a meeting with, and I says, I'm sorry, I'm late. I forgot what it was like being back in D.C. I'm on the side of the road. I can't get a taxi. Because the black man will have the taxis drive by them. It's the same thing. Same thing in New York. We know the stories. That's not what this debate is about. And I remember that this person wrote back to me. And back then I had a BlackBerry, I didn't have an iPhone, all the rest. And he said, yes, BlackBerries. And he said, oh, well, why are you waiting for a taxi? Just text this message and it's this service called Uber and a taxi will come. And I'm like, what do you mean? And I remember texting that message. And then all of a sudden, I get this text message back that says, oh, your taxi will be there in X, Y, and Z. I was sort of saying unparliamentary language, Mr. Speaker, because I was flabbergasted. I was like, this is incredible. So you mean to tell me that I no longer have to go through indignity of doing this thing, trying to find the closest white person to me to hail a taxi so I don't miss my meeting? Hold a second. This is the reality. I am explaining to you what many people had to live through. But here's the thing, Mr. Speaker. Here is the thing, Mr. Speaker. I give you that point because I'm making the point around what happens when markets don't function. When markets don't function, okay? So innovation happens, Mr. Speaker, then markets don't function when things are not supposed to work the way that they are. The reason why medallions in Washington, D.C. and in New York City are worthless is because an unregulated mousetrap came in that did it better than what was happening, undercut them, and took their business. And they weren't working well, Mr. Speaker. That's the fact. When I have to find a white person to hail a taxi for me, it means the market's not working well. And trust and believe, there are many other persons like that who had that indignity and said, you know what? They've built something, we're going to do this and all the rest. And that is the reason why we're here. But here's what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker. It existed because it fixed the problem. And here's the reality. The taxi industry in this country, Mr. Speaker, is lucky that we are so small. No, I'm being real. Let's say if we're going to have a debate, then let's have a debate. Because I see the honorable members out there trying to be churlish, but I'm having a debate about an issue that I know about. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, we're lucky that we are so small. Because if we were a larger jurisdiction, a tourist jurisdiction, we would have been here a long time undercutting this market. And we would have a very difficult time trying to regulate it out, as happened in many different places. And so here's the thing, Mr. Speaker, and this is important. It may not be that way forever. It may not be that way forever. The way that technology is going and AI is going, different things like that, people may be able to deploy these solutions in various countries and various things much faster than the regular things of which we try to do to keep up with people will matter. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, it is important that we deal with this from a regulated standpoint. There is no undercutting the market here, because to answer the question the honorable member raised, it is the same rate. So we're not dealing with persons undercutting the market. An important point. It is ours, and yes, it is seasonal, as has been announced and stated on multiple times in the papers that have been put forward.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order.
I believe the honorable member is misleading Bermuda as a whole and this House. He's speaking as if the industry is going to be regulated with this ride sharing. We're not regulating the industry at all right now. That's why we're in this position. We're not doing anything with taxi drivers not being on the road for 16 hours and the likes. We're not regulating. We got gypsy cabs up and down Bermuda. We're not regulating anything. That's why we're in the position that we're in. We need real regulation, enforcement, and it's not happening. And it's not going to happen under rideshare if we're not already doing it.
Amen.
I see the honorable member is excited. Clearly not a point of order, but that's all right. Now, Mr. Speaker, let me continue, because the honorable member is making a difference in distinction between regulation and enforcement of existing regulation. He points to one particular issue that is may not be enforced, but there are many taxi drivers who will tell you that there's enforcement that takes place on many of the various matters that are in the significant things, the minibuses and all the rest. So but he can have his opinion. That is fine. And I think that we've heard from members, and we've also heard from myself on the issue of the 16 hours. Because there are some points that are made from the opposition, that if the thing cannot be on the books, then you should take it off the books, because it's a very difficult thing to do. But let's not talk about the 16 hours and get stuck there, Mr. Speaker, because on the matter related to regulation, that means that there is a regulation market. And what the legislation sets out is a regulated market. Our taxi industry is a regulated market. We can talk about enforcement, but it is a regulated market. When you don't have regulation, it is unregulated, which is what you have in many jurisdictions with Uber or Lyft or other particular services, Mr. Speaker. Now, let me continue. As I said, Mr. Speaker, I guess I can say I'm probably the only person in this honorable House who has built a ride-hailing app. And so I can speak to this in a matter of which makes sense. I think it's important to address the honorable member's concerns and other concerns from persons, Mr. Speaker, is that tech can enforce. Code can enforce rules. You can audit code. It is built in via code. As the minister has said, when I talk about code, I'm talking about the code that is built into ride-sharing platforms, whichever it is. The legislation as set out, or the regulations which are coming forward, which the minister has spoken about, or if he has not, he will speak inside of his closing, speak about the fact that, as has been said widely, taxis get dispatched first. The only place where rideshare is used is via an app. And if the taxis on those particular platforms do not answer, then a ride-sharing vehicle is done. Whether it is what we do, Mr. Speaker, or whether it is what anyone else does, the reality is that it is via an app. I want us to understand that. You can audit code, Mr. Speaker. The TCD can see whether or not the people are actually following the regulations. And it does not require manual human intervention to do that. That's technology. That is what we are trying to do, Mr. Speaker, deal with matters related to technology. So yes, Mr. Speaker, it is clear that I support this because we need to advance. And what I want to do before I close is to thank all of the members of this government who have worked with, who've spoken, who have contributed, because this has gone through a lot of iterations in caucus, Mr. Speaker. It has not been an easy ride to get it to this place, Mr. Speaker, because it's a difficult issue. But we are trying to advance in a limited fashion, in a balanced form, where we believe that we can protect the interests of the taxi industry while also providing additional economic options and additional options for our visitors in a busy tourism season that we're expecting and in the future to go ahead and make it happen. When markets happen, when markets work, we can do better. And what we are trying to do here through this is to make sure that there are more and better options for our tourists and residents during peak time. And of course, Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to support this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Premier. Any other member wish to speak? None other? Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know as the hour is late, I want to start by thanking all members of this honorable House for the very robust debate that we have had over a very, very important issue, and that is transportation in this country. And Mr. Speaker, what I have heard before I get into my closing remarks is 3 key points that have gone throughout this debate. And the first one, which started at the beginning, was the honorable members from the other side continuously asking about data. And the way that the legislation is currently set up with dispatch companies is they are required to submit data to the Transport Control Department. And they are required to report it accurately. And as I was going through that data, Mr. Speaker, some of my colleagues have quoted some of this data, and I know, Mr. Speaker, you asked, where did that data come from? It comes directly from the active dispatch companies that are reporting to the Transport Control Department. And I want to put some of these stats in context. That the data that comes is that there are fluctuations through operator availability throughout the week. And the data, the dispatch data that has been given to TCD shows that the highest percentage throughout the week of taxis on the road is 68%. 68% on Tuesday. Sorry, let me start at Monday, 64%. Wednesdays, 64%. Thursdays, 62%. 61% on Fridays. 55% on Saturdays, and 58% on Sundays. At 7 a.m., Mr. Speaker, some of the data shows that only 24% availability of taxis on the road. We heard earlier, the average wait time for pickup is 37 minutes. And that was data from 2025. And the most shocking stat that you've heard this evening, and I'll reiterate it, Mr. Speaker, is that there are, at times in 2025, 80,000, to be exact, it was 82,284 unanswered ride requests. And you may say, well, that sounds ridiculous. I'm not saying that's people, but I have an example of a time it was Cop Match, and I was at a barbecue. And I had a good time all of Cop Match Day. And I cannot tell you the amount of times that my group called over and over and over to try to get a vehicle. So, Mr. Speaker, while the honorable members from the other side will say that there is no data, it does exist, and we can pour through it. And I'm sure, as the chairman of the Public Service Vehicle Licensing Board has said, his committee will be looking at that data even further. The second topic that we've heard quite a bit about this evening, Mr. Speaker, is enforcement. And while I'm not going to try to gaslight anyone in this House this evening, I must, if I may, speak of an email that I got on April 8th, 2025, Mr. Speaker. It was from a One Bermuda Alliance senator at the time. An email came into the acting Director of Transport Control Department. And I won't bore you with the full details of this, but essentially, this One Bermuda Alliance senator was questioning why would TCD disrupt the flow of traffic in Dockyard to enforce taxi regulations. Why would we do such a thing, Mr. Speaker?
Say it again.
An email, which included, it was sent to the honorable member who sits across the aisle, was included in this correspondence, questioning the Transport Control Department enforcement officers who, Mr. Speaker, were doing their job. And what better time to enforce the transport...
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order.
The honorable minister is probably intentionally misleading the house. This wasn't a question from that honorable senator about the enforcement being an issue. The issue was that the enforcement was planned at a time that inconvenienced tourists. It wasn't an email complaining about enforcement. And I have to speak up, Mr. Speaker, because it's being framed as though it was a complaint about enforcement when it was simply complaint about timing, and there was also some offers made about how that could be done better. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I think the point remains. We just went through we are in the midst of a 4-hour debate, Mr. Speaker, where the word enforcement has come up so often, no context was put around it. But I just bring this up, Mr. Speaker, that when enforcement is attempted to be made, there is no right time for enforcement. I guess he wants me, sorry, not he, the honorable member would prefer that we do enforcement in February in Dockyard when there are no taxi drivers there. Or no cruise ships. So Mr. Speaker, I don't want to belabor that point, but I make it to say that enforcement is happening. It will continue to happen. I cannot tell you to look at the faces of public officers who have to take the abuse when they try to enforce traffic laws in this country. There are stories that people march to Transport Control Department, threaten enforcement officers because they are simply trying to enforce the laws of this country. They asked the question, sorry, the honorable members from the other side. Have we ever taken anyone's permit? In September 16, 2025, the Public Service Vehicle Licensing Board canceled a permit for 12 months, ending in September 30th, 2026, following a numerous amount of written complaints. Mr. Speaker, I would say that is enforcement. Mr. Speaker, in July 15th, 2025, under this minister's watch, the initial public service vehicle license application of an individual was denied due to criminal convictions under sections 82(1)(a) and 82(2) of the Act. That is enforcement on the front end, Mr. Speaker. Two more. In August 3rd, and this was not under my watch, but it's been happening for a while, of 2021, the Public Service Vehicle License Board was canceled a taxi permit following several written complaints. And another one where taxi drivers were given warnings. I'm not going to go through all these, but from 2019 to present, I have a list, Mr. Speaker. 4 taxis were ticketed for operating without a valid license. 1 was ticketed for being uninsured. 25 tickets were issued for no driver's license. 12 tickets failing to insure a badge. So on and so on, the list goes, Mr. Speaker. So I reject the assertion from the honorable members from the other side that there is little to no enforcement. And Mr. Speaker, the third point that I've heard throughout this debate from the other side is where the stakeholders consulted. And Mr. Speaker, while it's a cute argument to make from the other side that their friends or the individuals that like to email them regularly will say, oh, the minister hasn't consulted or he doesn't. Mr. Speaker, I go to work every single day to serve the people of this country, not just to serve one segment of this country. So while, Mr. Speaker, we've all seen the emails, and that's what people do when they're trying to lobby. They get your attention. But, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to say that these wonderful public officers, some of whom are here this evening, have taken the direction of myself, the direction of my cabinet colleagues, the direction of this progressive Labour Party government who put service first, Mr. Speaker. And I've seen it. The stakeholders that they've met with, the Bermuda Hotel Association, the Bermuda Chamber of Commerce. I personally met with them again as recently as yesterday morning. The Bermuda Tourism Authority, the Bermuda Police Service, the Bermuda Public Service Vehicle Licensing Board, insurance companies, dispatch companies, one of which was actually their own, that was recently approved as a dispatch company. Skyport Limited, Mr. Speaker, Redco, the municipal corporations, cruise line representatives, the Road Safety Council, and CARTA. Now, Mr. Speaker, this is an extensive list of stakeholders. Now, while my honorable members from the other side may like to make a meal of one particular organization that has, I'm told, 160 members, the biggest outreach that this ministry has made was sending direct mailers to the nearly 3,000 holders of a public service vehicle license and explaining to them exactly what this legislation was trying to solve. And at the very top, it said taxis first. And then it went down, Mr. Speaker, step by step as to the problem that we are trying to solve and how this would benefit Bermudians and how it would not disenfranchise the taxi industry. So, Mr. Speaker, while my honorable members from the other side would like to say that there has been no consultation, that is absolutely false. Last thing when I get to stakeholders, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. The minister is misleading the House. There was never a statement that there was no consultation. The statement was that the taxi drivers have stated there was no consultation with them, and he can solve that with them. So he needs to be accurate in what he's saying. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, and I will bring this to a close because the importance here is that where I was going with that, there are more stakeholders and more drivers than just one particular organization. My history with the taxi industry goes back many years, family history and the like. The beauty of getting up and down this country, the beauty of the ministries that I have, forces me. It requires me to go up and down the community, into community clubs, sporting events, cultural events, tourism events is that you get to speak to people organically. Mr. Frost, I'll call his name, been in the industry for a long time. I saw him today and said, Mr. Frost, I'm sure I'm not your favorite person right now. He says, young man, you are doing an excellent job. And keep on keeping on. Younger drivers, I wake up in the morning and say, Darryl, I need to talk to you. And you're doing the right thing. I got up very early this morning to speak directly to the people, Mr. Speaker. That is consultation and that is stakeholders. But Mr. Speaker, I'm going to finish here and talk about a group of individuals that I haven't heard being discussed much this evening. And that is the Ms. Jones and Ms. Smith that we did hear in a previous debate from the opposition. These are the individuals that we all represent, Mr. Speaker. Some of my colleagues have mentioned them. These are the individuals that may live up on Glebe Road and struggle, Mr. Speaker, to get down the hill to Parsons Road to wash their laundry. These are the individuals, Mr. Speaker, who live on Palmetto Road that struggle to get to Hamilton Princess at 6 a.m. to work in the hospitality industry to service our guests, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what we haven't heard about is Ms. Jones, who leaves St. George's on a Friday night to go into Hamilton to have a party with her friend. It is pouring rain, Mr. Speaker. The car unfortunately breaks down on Victoria Street. You might think, well, they're in town. That's easy. Mr. Speaker, in the pouring rain, you would think you pull out your phone, you call for a taxi. When Ms. Jones and her friends cannot get to their party on Front Street because they cannot get a taxi to pick them up on Victoria Street, Mr. Speaker, we have a problem. And Mr. Speaker, this rideshare legislation that we are bringing this morning, while it may not fix every single issue of which the opposition has raised tonight, I think everyone is in broad agreement that transportation availability in this country is a massive problem. We've heard examples of long wait times. We've heard of challenges in the airport. And we've heard of gaps in this system that we are addressing with this legislation. Enforcement, as I said, is very important. And we will continue to enforce transportation. You heard earlier from the chair of the Public Service Licensing Board. I have been very stern with where we are going and what the expectations are. And this framework will introduce stronger accountability. Questions from the other side talked about credit cards. You can only use credit cards through the app for this legislation. We will continue to strengthen our relationship with the taxi industry. We will continue to engage with taxi operators, dispatchers, and all members of the sector. And ultimately, Mr. Speaker, this legislation seeks to address a real and long-standing issue. And we are ensuring that when it's all said and done, the resident and the visitor needs regarding transportation in Bermuda will improve, and this rideshare app is a reliable way of which to do so. With that, Mr. Speaker,
take it to committee.
I move that the bill be committed.
Thank you. Deputy?
Good evening, members. We are now in Committee of the Whole on the bill entitled the Motor Car Ride Sharing Amendment Act 2026. I call on the minister responsible. Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, I'd like to move all of the clauses all at once. There we go. Clauses 1 through 8.
It has been moved that we consider all clauses 1 through 8. Are there any objections? There are none. Minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Clause 1 provides the citation for the bill. Clause 2 amends Section 2 of the Act, interpretation, construction, and saving to amend the definition of public service vehicle and insert new definitions. Clause 3 amends Section 28 of the Act, establishment of the Public Service Vehicle Licensing Board, to expand the powers and duties to be discharged by the Public Service Vehicle Licensing Board to include the determination of applicants for ride-sharing permits, the inspection of vehicles proposed for use and used as ride-sharing vehicles, the granting, refusing, suspending, and revoking of ride-share permits. Clause 4 inserts the following new sections into the Act. Section 35C, application for a ride-share permit. Section 35D, grant of the ride-sharing permit, refusal or request for further information. Section 35E, inspection of a ride-sharing vehicle. Section 35F, persons prohibited from holding a ride-sharing permit. Section 35G, suspension or revocation of ride-sharing permit. Section 35H, registration with dispatching service. Section 35I, prohibition on providing a ride-sharing service. And Section 35J, appeal of a decision of the board. Clause 5 amends Section 37 of the Act, regulations, use of the public service vehicles, to provide for the imposition of a fine not exceeding $10,000 where a person commits an offense against regulations made under the Act. Clause 6 amends Section 37A of the Act, dispatching services, in subsection 1C by inserting new paragraph to be included, a digital network and any other systems approved by the board as approved equipment under that section. Clause 7 amends Section 1B of the Act to prescribe the fee for the issuance of a rideshare permit. And Clause 8 provides for the commencement of the Motor Car Ride-Sharing Amendment Bill 2026.
Thank you, Minister. Are there any other members who wish to speak to clauses 1 through 8? I recognize the member from constituency 22. Member, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the Honorable Minister for his presentation of this bill in committee. My first questions are in Clause 2, over at the second page of the bill. The Clause 2 of the second page provides for a series of definitions, and we see definitions for rideshare permit and rideshare operator in the middle of the page. Rideshare operator is a person granted a license. Rideshare permit is the permit granted by the board. My question to the Honorable Minister is, how many are anticipated to be granted? Is it 200? Is it 2,000? I know that Minister Lightbourne said in the general debate it would be 150 permits, but I can't find that anywhere in the bill, so I'd be grateful to hear on that point. While I'm still in Clause 2, Madam Chair, I'm happy to put my second question on Clause 2, with your leave, and that is under the definition of ride-sharing service. That provides that the ride-sharing service begins when the rideshare operator accepts a request from a person via dispatching service and continues while the ride-sharing operator transports the passenger, and ends when the last passenger of each journey exit the ride-sharing vehicle. So my second question is this. So when the ride-sharing vehicle is not providing what we've just described with the passenger, how is that going to work? If it's driving around between jobs with the decals that are required elsewhere in the bill, is it still a rideshare operator at those points in time, or is it not because it's not providing a ride-sharing service? Those are my two questions in relation to Clause 2. I do have other questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other persons who wish to speak to clauses 1 through 8? Not at this time. Minister, would you like to answer the questions, or member, do you wish to ask further questions? Okay, I
I'm
recognize
happy to
the
proceed
member.
through. I thought it might be
Right.
more assistance if he answered, but
Right.
I'm entirely in your hands, madam.
Yes, you may ask your questions.
Thank you very much. Moving then to Clause 3 of the bill, I understand from the general debate that the chairman of the board identified in this bill, if I understood it correctly, to be the Public Service Vehicle Licensing Board constituted under the 1951 Primary Act, was in fact MP Tyrrell. I may have misheard that, but if that is the case, that MP Tyrrell chairs the board, could the minister kindly share with us whether or not the code of practice referred to in Clause 3 has been commenced, and whether or not the minister has seen a draft of the code of practice that the board is supposed to produce? Over the page, at page 3 of the bill, I then have a question in relation to Clause 4, if you'd like me to continue on to Clause
Yes,
4.
continue.
In Clause 4, we see, in relation to applications for ride-sharing permits, reference to terms and conditions specified by the board. Again, just as I had a question posed in relation to the code of practice, the same question applies to the terms and conditions. Have these been commenced by the board, and has the minister seen a draft of those? Further down, we see in relation to still at Clause 4, but at the bottom, at sub 4, so this is the inserted language for application, 35C, we see 1, we see 2, we see 3, and 4, it says this: a person making an application under subsection 2 is subject to A, criminal record check, and B, a traffic offense record check. And so what I'm wondering here in relation to that bit of the bill, if you have an outstanding traffic offense, are you therefore ineligible for ride share? And if that's not the case, why do we do the check if you're not ineligible owing to the traffic offense? Still at page 3 of the bill at the bottom, there's a section 35D that is inserted by Clause 4, and we see 35D 2A. The board may, after considering an application under subsection 1, approve the application and grant the ride-sharing permit subject to such conditions as are specified by the board. My question in relation to those conditions is, who is the responsible entity for enforcing those conditions? And if it is the people at TCD that the minister talked about earlier, how are they to know about the conditions imposed by the board? Madam Chair, I'm happy to go on if you wish, or we can get a couple answers before I move on
Yes,
to
I
page
will
4.
see if the minister wishes to begin answering some of your questions. Minister, or would you prefer him? Okay, he prefers you continue. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm then moving on to page 4 of the bill. And then we see this is still continuing with the insertion of 35D, which started at page 3 of the bill and now turns over the page to page 4. And here we're talking about the ride-share permit being granted under subsection 2A, if you see that at 3 towards the top of the page. And then we see A, B, C, and D. Under D, it says that the permit, if granted, is, quote, non-transferable from a person to another person or from a private motor vehicle to another private motor vehicle. And I'd invite the Honorable Minister just to clarify my understanding, and I'll use Ms. Jones since we talked about her earlier. Does that mean if Ms. Jones has a license and Ms. Jones's Fiat has a license, that only Ms. Jones may drive the Fiat and the Fiat may only be driven by Ms. Jones? I think it does mean that, but I'd invite clarification. Moving then, Madam Chair, to paragraph 4, it says a ride-sharing permit shall be granted for a period as specified by the board. So in relation to the reference to period, is the minister able to suggest to us or share with this House how often that will be renewed? What is the period intended? Again, we heard during the debate, I believe it was Minister Rebane said that this was to be seasonal. I think some of the other speakers from across the aisle said that this would be seasonal. I can find nowhere in this bill a reference to it being seasonal, and so I'd be grateful if the minister could clarify where that seasonality arises in relation to that period. The next question still on this page is in relation to under 6, still on the same page below 4 where I just posed the question. After consultation with the board, the minister may, by order subject to the negative resolution procedure, prescribe the number of ride-sharing permits to be issued. Now, I've already asked the minister an earlier question, I think it was my first question, as to how many are envisaged, 200, 2,000. Is it the 150 mentioned by one of the honorable members across the aisle? The question here, though, is if it's to be determined by the minister, if the board, per this bill, is preparing the terms and conditions, and the board, per this bill, is preparing the code of practice, why is it that the number is going to be determined by the minister? That seems a bit illogical, that the experts who are dealing with all of this aren't the ones who would then determine what is needed by the market that the Premier so eloquently spoken about earlier. Over the page on page 5 of the bill, well, I mean, if it's market driven, let's let the people who are actually on the ground level decide, one would think. But no doubt the minister will explain the thinking behind that. The next question is on page 5 of the bill. And there's if you recall, Madam Chair, I earlier pointed out the point about if you have a traffic violation, that would be a traffic offense record check under Clause 4. So in order to get the application, you have to have a traffic offense check. However, if you are then refused a request, that doesn't provide, I'm sorry, I'm on the page 5 at the top, so it's in relation to persons prohibited. So in order to get it, you get to have the background check of your traffic offenses. But you can be prohibited simply because of the convicted of a criminal offense. There's no reference to under 35F. There's A and there's B, but there's no C, which one would expect to see, that if you have a traffic offense record, having had it checked by the board, and if it actually exists, one would have thought that that would in fact then prohibit you, but it doesn't seem to be the case. Again, if you look down to the next section that's inserted at page 5, Madam Chair, 35G, we see again that under little Roman numeral 3, that if you're convicted of any traffic law or regulations, you can be suspended. So it doesn't really make sense that you can ban from applying, you can be suspended or revoked, but you can't actually be prohibited at the top of Clause 5 of the page 5 of the bill. The next question is still at 35G in the middle of page 5, down at Roman numeral 6. Here we're talking about suspension or revocation, and at the top there you see the board may suspend a ride-sharing permit where, and it's Roman numeral 6, breaches of any other condition specified by the board. Now again, how do we know who is checking this? Is it the board? Is it some other party? And if it's some other party, how do they know the conditions that have been specified by the board? Just above that, at Roman numeral 5, we see that you can have a suspension or revocation if you are the subject of a written complaint made by a senior traffic officer. And I'm just curious where that is defined or what that's supposed to mean. What is a senior traffic officer as opposed to just a traffic officer? Why is there a distinction being made there in relation to the seniority of that person, and whether a junior traffic officer should also be able to issue something that would cause suspension or revocation? It would seem logical. Further down, we see then what's going to happen if you are suspended, right? So here is someone possibly with a criminal offense or with a traffic violation or is subject to a written complaint. Before we have suspension under this bill, at 35G, under 2, we have prior to suspending. And there are a whole host of things that are going to have to happen before you can be suspended. Under A, you have to give notice in writing to the ride-sharing permit holder that includes 1, a statement of the alleged breach, and 2, actions required to remedy the alleged breach where remediable. And then you have under B, where a breach is not remedied, under 2A2, allow the ride-sharing permit holder the opportunity to make representations before the board at the hearing, right? So first of all, you have to write to them and tell them what they're doing wrong. Then you have to show what the breach is. Then you have to give them time to remedy. And then you have to give the opportunity that they can come and make representations before the board at a hearing, all prior to suspending. So I'm just wondering whether or not that's an overly laborious approach to be taking to people who you might want to suspend or revoke for criminal activity or traffic law violations. It just does seem a little bit onerous. In terms of B, under 35G, this is 1B, again, a motor car used to provide ride-sharing services fails a vehicle inspection conducted by the department. That's another criteria for suspension or revocation. How often does the minister envisage that these vehicles will be inspected? I note that it says it's only when it's directed under Section 35E. So are those the only times there are going to be inspections, or will there be other times when there will be inspections? Next page is over to page 6. In the middle of page 6, we talk about the operation of a ride-sharing service in an efficient manner shall include, and we see A, maintaining the ride-share vehicle in a decent and comfortable condition, etc., and B, in relation to the ride-sharing operator complying with the code of practice for ride-sharing operators. So again, a question as to how that's going to be checked, considering those are requirements for people to both be a ride-sharing person who's licensed and have a vehicle that's licensed. How is that, in fact, going to be checked? And I see the minister nodding his head. He's obviously contemplated these issues. Then we have at 35H1, where we see registration with the dispatching service, right? So it says this, 35H1, a person granted a ride-sharing permit under Section 35D, and a ride-sharing operator shall register, it's free of charge, but they shall register, it's mandatory, with every dispatching service. So if you want to be a rideshare operator in Bermuda, you've got to register with everybody. That's what I understand that. It's now a mandatory obligation to register with everyone, including the one that our Honorable Premier has declared his interest in. So everyone's going to have to register with all of them. Is that my correct understanding? That's my correct. I'm just it's going to boost the numbers of registrations. One might think. And Madam Chairman, I realize the hour is late, so I'll try and be quick on my last two questions. This is at page 7 of the bill, and it's in relation to 35I for India, and it's one, a person shall not offer a ride-sharing service unless he, and there's a number of restrictions. And at the top of page 7, under D for David, one of the restrictions is that he's registered with every dispatching service. So I'm wondering, in relation to the point that was raised quite a lot, but not addressed with respect by the Honourable Minister during the general debate, if you're registering with every dispatch service, how is that going to work in terms of airport pickups and the inability to queue, which we heard mentioned in the general debate? My final question, Madam Chair, on the last page, page 8, I just heard from the Honourable Premier, what's that got to do with anything? I think a number of speakers, both on this side and on his side, identified one of the biggest problems is the fact is the people aren't getting picked up at the airport. So what has it got to do with it? It's actually got a very major thing to do. My next question, and if the Honourable Premier has questions on his own bill, he can certainly pose them. My last question is page 8, and this was at the ride-sharing permit amount, which we heard was $1,000. During the debate, we also heard reference to a $400 per annum fee, and I just would welcome clarity for that because it doesn't appear in the bill. And during the debate, it was also
Point of order,
suggested.
Madam Chair.
Your point of order, Minister.
The member is asking a litany of questions in committee, which is not uncommon. But the purpose of us going to committee is to do a number of things. Number one, make amendments to the bill, propose new clauses, or ask that clauses be removed. If his question is not leading to any of that, I ask your guidance as pertains to whether or not we're seeing abuse of procedure.
The member is allowed to ask any questions on the line items. Continue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My last and final question. And I was just asking about the $400 per annum that was mentioned in the general debate. And finally, it was suggested by one of the debate people that there was a suggested
Point of order,
fee.
Madam Chair.
Your point of order.
To what provision in the standing order is your ruling
I don't have
pertaining
the
to?
standing order, but our custom and practice when we are in committee, as it pertains to the objectives in the committee, a member is able to deal with the line items of the related to the objectives, must state that line item and base his questions specifically to those line items.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, my line item was in relation to the ride-sharing permit cost of $1,000 at Clause 7, and I was asking two further and indeed final points. I'll say to the Minister, these are my final questions, so perhaps we can get the answers. One was the $400 per annum, and then there was a suggestion that the actual the fee was the same as the taxis. And I don't doubt that if that's the case, but it was suggested that that was said in this bill somewhere, and I haven't seen it anywhere. And if the Honorable Minister could perhaps confirm on that. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other members who wish to speak to clauses 1 through 8? There are no other members who wish to speak to clauses 1 through 8. I call on the Minister. Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to go through these. I think my colleague said, was it 140? 120 questions. All right. So I'm going to go through them. So the first one. Madam Chair. Asks how many permits will be provided. The answer is 150 permits. And the Minister has the right to amend based on data. Question 2 was when the ride-sharing vehicle is not in service, what is it? When not providing a service, the ride-share vehicle, Madam Chair, reverts to a private motor car. Madam Chair, question was, has the code of practice commenced and has the Minister seen a copy? The code of practice has not commenced as it is in the regulations. However, I can say that I have seen a draft. Next question is 35C 1 to 4, speaks to which the applicant is subject to, are you ineligible for rideshare if there's a traffic offense? Depending on the traffic offense, Madam Chair, the board may review and determine if the applicant has violated their public service vehicle license. Madam Chair, who is the responsible entity for enforcing the conditions imposed by the board? That would be the Transport Control Department, Madam Chair. Question regarding 35D and the rideshare permit being granted or non-transferable. Does it mean that, and we're using this as examples, Ms. Jones is the only one who can drive their car? A permit is non-transferable, Madam Chair. However, like a taxi, they can assign another public service vehicle license holder to drive their permitted rideshare car. Question, what period and how often will the permits be renewed? The permit is intended to be an annual permit with seasonal segments. Where does the seasonality appear? The seasonality is prescribed in the regulations. The hours of operation for rideshare will be as follows. From the 1st of October to the 31st of March, it will be only from 10 p.m. until 6 a.m., Saturdays, Sundays, and public holidays, all times. From April 1st to 30th, it will be at all times. And the Minister, at the discretion, by order published in the Official Gazette, may vary the dates and times. And an example that I will give was if there's a particular rideshare vehicle that is an accessible vehicle, and we need that vehicle to be on the road at all times, and the Minister can make that discretion by order in Public Gazette. Question, why is the number being determined by the Minister and not the Public Service Vehicle Licensing Board? Because as procedurally, Madam Chair, orders are the responsibility of the Minister and not the board. Question regarding 35G6, who determines breaches? And is it the board or is it some other party? The answer for that would be the board. 35G5, what is a senior traffic officer? The senior traffic officer has the role of reporting to the board. The senior traffic officer reports to the board, but the other traffic officers report to the senior traffic officer. So question around 35G2, I'm not sure this was a question, rather a comment, that the honorable member from the other side feels that this seems to be overly cumbersome, and the response that I have here is that it's natural justice. Question 35G1B, Will there be other times where there will be inspections? The annual renewal of the permit will see, Madam Chair, a time when there will be inspections. How will that be checked with the code? The code is a document that helps and guides the operations to be in compliance with the legislation. The traffic offenses will address legislation or any such non-compliance. The question was that registration must be with every dispatch. Is that correct? The answer is yes. Must register with every ride-sharing service so there is maximum reach. Question, how will airport pickups work and the ability to queue? They will not queue as this is a ride-share service. If someone is at the location of the airport, there will be a section, a place at the airport where ride-shares go and pick up. I mean, you've seen that in most places where, at the end of the airport, you may say ride-sharing pickups this way. They won't be waiting there, but you can go and pick up there. There's talked about fees. The fee is not $400 for the annual fee. The annual fee is $1,000 annual permit fee. However, $400 is for the payroll tax, and that will not be in this bill. Are the fees the same as the taxi? They are the same, meaning the fares, I think, not fees, fares, and that will be outlined in the regulations. Madam Chair, I believe that I've answered all questions from the honorable member.
Thank you, Minister. Are there any other persons who wish to speak to clauses 1 through 8? I recognize the member from constituency 22. Member, you have the floor.
Thank you. I am grateful to the Honourable Minister who indeed did answer most of my questions. The one that I don't think I had an answer to, although it's possible that I missed it because someone was speaking to me from behind, perhaps, thank you, Minister Hayward, perhaps I missed it, was just the point about the traffic violations and how the traffic violations prohibit an application and they allow for suspension or revocation, but they don't prohibit the holding of the permit under 35F at the bottom of 4 and the top of 5. So that's my last question. Shouldn't that, in fact, also be included there in that section?
Thank you, member. Are there any other members who wish to speak to clauses 1 through 8? There being none at this time, I call on the minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If you would please just allow me just a few moments to just get the
certainly
correct for that.
Yes, of course. We definitely deal with facts in the House of Assembly, so I would rather you take your time and make sure you have the correct answer.
Thank you.
I recognize the member from constituency 18, the Premier.
You know my number. Madam Chair, while the honorable team is providing the answer to the minister, just want to go back to a particular question that the honorable member had raised and just provide additional clarity as per the bill, because the honorable member, and this was on section 35G2, where he said prior to suspending a ride-sharing permit under, and it gave the whole thing, and he was basically saying that it was a laborious process. Yes, that is natural justice, but it is also important to note that the very next clause says, notwithstanding subsection 2, the board may suspend a ride-sharing permit with immediate effect upon receipt of report in writing from the senior traffic officer where it's expedient to do so in the interest of safety or security and of person. So there is the ability to do it immediate. So I don't want it to be left in the impression in the public space that for any suspension you have to go through that process. There is another provision that allows to be immediate if a report is given from a senior traffic officer.
Thank you, Premier. Thank you for that clarification. Thank you. Are there any other members who wish to speak to clauses 1 through 8? There being none, when the minister is ready, he can take the floor. And I want to remind the public who is listening that at this late hour, we are debating the bill entitled the Motor Car Ride Sharing Amendment Act 2026. And this topic is very current on many minds, and I have no doubt there are quite a few out there in the listening public. Yes. So. Minister, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and we're getting late, so may have been difficult to capture the question. So for this one, I'm not going to repeat the question, but I believe I have the answer. That traffic violations are an application checking process for the board that allows the board to determine if there's a violation that impacts the holders of the PSVLB. Of the public service vehicle license.
Thank you, Minister. Are there any other members who wish to speak to clauses 1 through 8? I recognize the member from constituency 22. Member, you have
Thank
the
you.
floor.
It is late, Madam Chair, and I'll just make the point, and then the minister can take it under advisement. What I'm saying is that 35C has a prohibition where there's a requirement for a traffic offense record check, yeah? Likewise, in relation to suspension and revocation, 35G, there is the ability to suspend in relation to the traffic check. What I'm saying is that what is missing is that same provision in relation to 35F. One would expect the same provision to appear in 35F. And if the minister would kindly just take that under advisement, I don't need to trouble us further. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other members who wish to speak to clauses 1 through 8? There being none, I call on the minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I do thank the honorable member for giving us that grace, and I will take it under advisement and be sure to get back to him at the appropriate time. So, Madam Chair, I now move that the clauses 1 through 8 be approved.
It has been moved that clauses 1 through 8 be approved. Are there any objections? There are none. Continue, Minister. The preamble.
Madam Chair, I move that the preamble be approved.
It has been moved that the preamble be approved. Are there any objections?
Madam Chair, I move that the bill be reported to the House as printed or amended.
It has also been moved that the board be reported to the House as printed. Are there any objections to that?
Yeah.
There are none. So I recognize the member from constituency 30. Member, you have? Okay, there are none. So if you have any, it's too late. Just, you know.
Thank you, Madam Deputy. Members, are there any objections to the bill entitled the Motor Car Ride Sharing Amendment Act 2026 being reported to the House? There are no objections? Well, it's been reported. Thank you. Premier, before I do that third reading, do you have seeking indulgence right now?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that Standing Order 14 be suspended to enable me to introduce a bill to this honorable House.
Any objections? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm introducing the following bill for its first reading, so it may be placed on the order paper for the next meeting, and it is the Payroll Tax Amendment and Validation Act 2026.
Thank you. Minister, do your third reading.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that Standing Order 21 be suspended to enable me to move the bill entitled the Motor Car Ride Sharing Amendment Act 2026 be now read a third time by its title only.
Any objections? No objections being recorded? Minister?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill be now read a third time by its title only and passed.
The bill has been read a third time by title only and is now passed. Premier?
What's the date, Mr. Speaker? Oh, Mr. Speaker, I move this honorable House now adjourn until Monday, March the 9th at 10 a.m.
Thank you. Does any member wish to speak to that? There are no members wishing to speak to that? We stand. Members, the House now stands adjourned until Monday at 10 a.m. Have a good weekend, and we'll see you on Monday morning.
Bermuda Live on YouTube. Subscribe now.